Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Before you drift off, it would be a nice idea if you could leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from. Please don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Right, let's get comfy and relaxed, and let's begin. Story 1, Whispers from the Dark. The day had dragged on longer than I'd anticipated, each hour slipping into the next like the shadows creeping across the empty streets as I returned home. The late afternoon sun had fought valiantly against the encroaching dusk, but as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed the light dimming faster than usual. I felt a familiar pang of relief at being back in my own space, yet a disquieting chill settled over me as I took in the scene before me. A car I didn't recognize was parked at the curb, its metallic blue paint glimmering unsettlingly under the fading light. It was an ordinary sedan, but every detail about it seemed off. The lack of dust on the windshield, the way the car's shadow stretched unnaturally long as if it were trying to reach me. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the car door's handle, my instinct screaming that something was wrong. I glanced at my front door, and a jolt of panic surged through my stomach. It was slightly ajar, swinging ever so slightly in the evening breeze. I was sure that I had locked it before leaving for work that morning. Had I? I couldn't remember. That uncertainty gnawed at my resolve as I approached the house, my heart pounding in my chest like a frantic drum. I stood at the threshold for what felt like an eternity, staring into the dim entryway that had always felt so welcoming. Now, it seemed a yawning maw, inviting and terrifying all at once. A part of me wanted to sprint back to my car and drive until the world blurred past me. Instead, I placed my hand on the doorknob, feeling its coolness seep into my skin. I pushed the door open, the rusty hinges creaking in protest. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the cavernous silence. No answer came, just the soft rustling of leaves outside and the distant chirping of birds settling into their nests. I took a cautious step inside, the air thick with emptiness. The familiar scent of lavender and agewood swirled around me, but it felt suffocating now, as if the house itself were holding its breath. I peeked into the living room, my eyes scrutinizing the shadows gathering in the corners. Nothing seemed amiss, yet unease skittered along my spine. I called again, louder this time, "Is anyone here?" A part of me cringed at the desperation in my voice, but perhaps it would shoo away whatever unseen presence lurked just beyond my line of sight. As I moved through the hallway, I noticed a whispering sound, low and indistinct, seeping up from the basement door. My blood ran cold, an icy grip tightening around my heart. I strained to listen, my breath catching in my throat, and then I heard it again, a faint murmur, as though someone were speaking just below the threshold of comprehension. I retreated a step, my mind racing through the possibilities. Could it be a prank? A misunderstanding? The basement had always frightened me with its dark corners and musty air, but this felt different. It felt intentional. The whispers continued, a rhythmic chant that twisted and curled through the air, wrapping around me like ivy. I felt an inexplicable compulsion to descend those stairs, to confront whatever was waiting in the darkness. With each heartbeat, the tension mounted. I gripped the banister, its splintered wood biting into my palm, and took a hesitant step toward the basement door. The whispers suddenly ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence that felt almost alive. I stood frozen, wrestling with the urge to flee, but curiosity pushed me forward. I could not turn my back on the unknown. I steeled myself, my hand reaching for the doorknob, and twisted it open. The basement loomed before me, an abyss cloaked in shadow. I flicked on the light switch, but the bulb flickered dimly, casting long, distorted shapes across the walls. The whispering returned, now louder, frantic, as if the unseen voices had sensed my intrusion. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to step into the darkness. As I descended the creaking stairs, the air grew colder, wrapping around me like a shroud. I could barely make out the shapes of forgotten boxes piled high, relics of a past life that felt foreign even in my own home. The shadows danced, and I found myself questioning the very solidity of my surroundings. Was this truly my basement, or had I stumbled into another realm? Who's there? I tried to sound brave, but my voice trembled, betraying my fear. The whispers ceased again, swallowed by the silence. I strained my eyes, searching for movement among the boxes, but found only the oppressive stillness of the space. Then, a soft creak echoed behind me, a sound so quiet yet so stark against the stillness of the basement that it sent a shiver down my spine. I turned slowly, the hairs on my arms standing on end, and felt the weight of the darkness pressing against me. I wasn't alone. I could feel it in my bones. The dim light flickered again, and I caught a glimpse of something, a shadow flitting past the corner of my eye. My breath quickened, each inhale a frantic gasp as I tried to convince myself that my eyes were playing tricks on me. The whispering returned, this time more insistent, as if beckoning me deeper into the recesses of my own home. I hesitated, torn between the primal urge to flee and the gnawing question of what awaited me in the dark. Someone or something had been waiting for me, lurking in the shadows, and I had unwittingly walked right into its embrace. The air was thick with a damp chill as I stepped out of my car, my heels clacking against the asphalt. The late autumn sun was dipping behind the horizon, leaving a smattering of indigo across the sky. I had hoped to return to a quiet evening, exhausted from a long day at work. Yet, as I approached my front door, my pulse quickened. The door stood slightly ajar, an eerie invitation into the unknown. A strange car idled at the curb, its darkened windows shielding any occupants from my view. My heart raced. I thought about my neighbors, how they would have greeted me if they were home. Instinctively, I reached for my phone but hesitated. Who would I even call? I had no idea who might be lurking in the shadows of my own home. Get a grip, I muttered to myself, forcing my hand to the door. It swung open with a soft creak, the chill of the inside air wrapping around me like a heavy cloak. I held my breath, the stillness wrapping around me. The faint smell of something metallic lingered, but I couldn't place it. Was I imagining things? Hello? I called, the word echoing back at me, swallowed by the house. No response. Just the silence of the evening settling in. I stepped inside, moving cautiously, my breath catching in my throat as I peered into the darkness. The living room was just as I had left it that morning, cushions in disarray, a few empty coffee mugs on the side table. But there was something else. A shiver ran down my spine as I noticed the basement door, slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness yawning beneath the threshold. I could hear it now, soft whispering, barely audible but unmistakable. My heart raced. The room spun for a moment as I tried to gather my courage. Had I left the radio on? No, it wasn't a broadcast. The whispers carried an urgency, like a distant conversation I was not meant to overhear. I stepped forward, each footfall a deliberate act of bravery. The voices ebbed and flowed, a chilling rhythm that gripped my insides. Leaning closer to the basement door, I could distinguish words, but they were muffled, rendered unintelligible by the grainy distance. Panic tugged at my sanity. I hesitated, straddling the line between curiosity and fear. Hello? I called again, this time louder, more demanding. The whispering ceased. For a moment, the silence was suffocating, pressing in on me like a weight. I strained my ears, hoping to catch any sign that I was imagining things. Nothing. Just the rhythmic beating of my heart echoing in my ears. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open wider. The hinges creaked as if protesting my intrusion, revealing the darkened staircase leading down into the basement. I hesitated, feeling the encroaching darkness swallowing the light behind me. In that moment, I knew I had a choice: retreat to the outside world or confront the unknown. What could possibly go wrong? I stepped down, each creaking step amplifying my unease. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. It was a message from Sarah, my closest friend. "Thinking of you. Call me if you need anything." I almost replied, but the whispering had resumed, echoing through the damp air, stronger now, as if encouraging me to keep moving. "Who's there?" I called out. My voice trembled, wavering in the cavernous space. The whispers faded once again, leaving only the echoes of my question hanging in the air. I reached for the light switch, my palm slick with perspiration. But just as I thought to flick it on, a sudden noise, a soft thud from deeper within the basement made me freeze. My heart thundered in my chest. I could feel the tension rising, coiling tightly around my throat. The thud had been followed by another rustle, and then silence, thick and suffocating. I steeled my nerves and pressed my foot down the next step. The basement was dark and cold, the air musty and stale. I fumbled along the wall until my fingers brushed against the rough texture of the light switch. I flicked it up, and the harsh bulb flickered to life, casting long shadows across the room. What met my eyes made me recoil. The basement was empty, but scattered across the floor were remnants of belongings thrown carelessly about, boxes overturned, a few of my old things, now haphazardly displayed like forgotten memories. Among them lay a framed photograph of me and Sarah, the glass cracked, as if someone had intentionally broken it. I scanned the room again, breath hitching in my throat. Nothing seemed out of place except for that pervasive feeling of being watched, a prickling at the back of my neck. I descended further, my heart pounding like a war drum, feeling the weight of whatever lingered just out of sight. "Is anyone here?" I shouted, my voice reverberating through the small space. I felt foolish, vulnerable, yet desperate for an answer. And then I heard it, a low, gravelly voice that rose from the shadows, muffled yet clear in its intent. "You've come home." I whipped around, my eyes white with terror, the whispers of the basement suddenly crystallizing into a chilling clarity. Someone was down here with me, lurking in the shadows, and the realization settled over me like a cold tide. "Who are you?" I demanded, but my voice trembled, betraying the fear clawing at my insides. I stood frozen, heart racing, waiting for the figure to emerge, to reveal itself from the darkness. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the faint whispering, echoing like a beckoning cry, urging me to understand that I was not alone. The evening air felt thick and suffocating as I approached my home, a modest two-story that had once been my refuge. But that evening, something gnawed at my gut. The shadows cast by the street lamp flickered as I walked closer, and I noticed a car parked in front of my driveway, a dark sedan, sleek and unfamiliar. I paused, my heart thudding louder than the rhythmic tap of my heels on the pavement. The car's windows reflected the orange glow of the streetlight, but it revealed nothing of its occupants. My breath quickened, and a cold sweat trickled down my back. It was Friday, and I had left the office later than usual, but this was not the type of surprise one wanted after a long day. As I reached the front porch, a sense of dread enveloped me. The front door stood slightly ajar, an uninvited invitation that sent a shiver racing down my spine. I tried to summon courage, but my feet felt like they were glued to the ground. "Hello?" I called, my voice a shaky whisper that barely cut through the stillness. No answer, just the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. I stepped forward, my heart pounding harder, forcing the door open. The house greeted me with a familiar scent, musty, with a hint of lavender from the candles I often lit. Yet tonight, this smell felt tainted, as though something had settled into the corners of my home. The hallway stretched before me, swallowed in darkness, my heartbeat quickening with each cautious step. I moved deeper inside, calling out again. "Is anyone here?" My voice echoed oddly, but still no response. That was when I heard it, a faint whispering, coming from the basement. The sound was low, almost like a chant, twisting and curling around the edges of the air. It was unsettling enough to make my skin prickle. I stood frozen for a moment, weighing my options. I could flee, run back into the night with the strange car and the whispers behind me, or confront whatever awaited me in the dark. Steeling my nerves, I walked toward the basement door, each step heavy with uncertainty. The door creaked open as if it had been waiting for me. The stairs descended steeply into a palpable darkness that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I reached for the light switch on the wall, hoping to dispel the encroaching gloom, but my hand hesitated. What if the shadows harbored something unseen, something that had been waiting? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to move, and flicked the switch. The light flickered briefly, illuminating the basement's concrete walls and revealing nothing but old boxes and cobwebs. The whispers grew louder, edging into clarity, though it was still impossible to discern the words. My heart raced, the sound gripping me tighter than the fear clawing at my throat. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice a trembling accusation against the silence. I took a step down, the stairs groaning under my weight, and the whispers abruptly ceased. An uncanny stillness fell over the space, hanging thick like fog, pressing against my senses. I strained to hear anything, a breath, a shuffle, but the silence was deafening. That was when I saw it, a shadow flitting across the far wall, quick and deliberate, as if it had been caught in the act of hiding. I stumbled backward, my hand gripping the rail tightly as I turned to flee, but a low, almost melodic voice rose from the abyss of darkness. "Stay. I've been waiting for you." The words wrapped around me, heavy and intoxicating, halting my flight. A chill ran through me, a sickening mix of dread and morbid curiosity. "What do you want?" I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "Everything," the voice replied, smooth and chilling, a sinister calm that threatened to shatter my resolve. "I've watched you. I know your secrets." My breath caught in my throat. The shadows shifted again, and I thought I caught a glimpse of movement, a figure, humanoid yet indistinct, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. With every fiber of my being, I wanted to flee, to escape the suffocating darkness and the promise of terror it held. But I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear and an inexplicable urge to know more. "Who are you?" I asked, forcing the words out despite the tremor in my voice. "Just a friend," the figure crooned, stepping into the light for a brief moment. An outline emerged, tall and thin, with eyes that glimmered like sharpened glass. It was then that I recognized the features, twisted and warped in the light, but unmistakable. A face I had thought forever lost. "Emily?" I gasped, the name a whisper choked with shock. "Did you forget me so easily?" the specter taunted, taking another step forward, the light flickering dangerously. My heart raced as I stumbled back, the memories flooding my mind, a name I had buried, a past I had tried to forget. Could it really be her? The friend I had lost in that terrible accident years ago? Everything about this felt wrong, the disarray of the basement, the whispers, the haunting presence. I clung to the railing, my mind scrambling to process the reality of what stood before me. As the last glimmer of light flickered and dimmed, plunging me back into darkness, I realized that there was no escaping the truth. Some visitors linger far beyond the grave. As I stood on the cracked pavement of my driveway, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows that danced across the front yard. A strange car sat in front of my house, its sleek, dark form an unwelcome anomaly among the familiar clutter of my neighborhood. The driver's seat was empty, yet it felt as if someone had just vacated it, leaving the smell of fear lingering like a stale perfume. My heart quickened, its rhythm drumming in my ears. I focused on the front door, barely ajar. A chill ran through me, tightening my throat. I was certain I had locked it. Hadn't I? My mind raced back to the morning routine, the frantic last-minute search for my car keys. It seemed trivial now, but I could almost picture myself double-checking the lock, the reassuring click echoing in the silence of the house. With a deep breath, I approached the door, the wooden frame seeming to loom larger with each step. The late evening breeze carried whispers, but no sound dared to breach the stillness around the house. I pushed the door gently, and it creaked in protest, revealing a sliver of darkened entryway that felt like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. The word hung in the air like a fragile thread, uncertain and fragile. No answer came, only the soft rustling of something in the stillness beyond. The house was darker than I remembered, the late afternoon light fading quickly. I flipped on the hall light, but its comforting glow did little to chase away the shadows crowding the corners. I stepped inside, hesitating at the threshold. "Is anyone here?" I tried again, my voice steadier this time, though I could feel the cold touch of dread creeping up my spine. There was a rustle from the basement, a quiet murmur that sent a jolt through me. It was too soft to discern words, yet the tone was unmistakable. Someone was down there, in the dark. I had never liked the basement. It felt like a forgotten grave of old boxes and half-remembered memories, but now it felt like a pit of despair, a maw ready to consume anything that stepped too close. I stood frozen, rooted by instinct, but curiosity prodded at me like a sharp needle. I cautiously approached the basement door, hesitating as my hand gripped the cold metal railing. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, swirling up the stairs like tendrils of smoke. I strained to listen, but the words remained just out of reach, teasing me with their murky intent. Taking one last breath, I pushed the door open, the creak echoing like a scream in the silence. The stairs descended into darkness, the chill wrapping around me like a shroud. My heart raced, each thump echoing in the cavernous space. I felt an invisible weight pressing down on my chest, urging me to turn back, to escape while I still could. "Please," I whispered, hardly able to hear my own voice above the growing whispers. "Who's down there?" Silence enveloped me for a moment, stretching painfully, before a low voice replied, barely above a whisper, "You shouldn't have come home." A shiver coursed through me, pooling in my stomach. My instinct screamed at me to retreat, to shut the door and lock it tight, but my feet seemed rooted to the ground, caught in a web of terror and intrigue. I peered down into the void, desperate to see whatever lay in the shadows. "Megan? Is that you?" The voice had shifted, now carrying an air of familiarity. I squinted into the darkness, trying to make out a figure, a shape, anything. The whispers faded to silence, leaving only the echo of my labored breathing. The name cut through me. It was my own. I hadn't uttered it. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice rising in pitch. The air felt charged with tension, a low hum that settled heavily in the pit of my stomach. "What do you want?" Silence again, but the darkness seemed to shift, coalescing into something tangible. I thought I saw glimmer eyes. No, it was just my imagination playing tricks in the dim light. Suddenly, I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched, a prickling awareness that crawled across my skin. I backed away, stumbling up the steps, but the voice called again, softer this time, almost soothing. "Stay. You need to see." And then I saw a flash of movement, a silhouette flickering just beyond the reach of the light. My pulse quickened like a trapped bird, the urge to flee gripping me hard, but a morbid curiosity held me still. I summoned every ounce of courage and flicked on the basement light switch. The bulb sputtered to life, casting a harsh glow over my cluttered storage space. My breath hitched as I stepped cautiously down the last few stairs, the light illuminating the corners I had always avoided. The basement was empty, or so it seemed, until I noticed a figure huddled in the far corner, half hidden beneath a tattered blanket. My heart sank. It was unmistakably human, but the shape was curled in on itself, as if it were trying to disappear altogether. "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice trembling as fear and confusion twisted together in the pit of my stomach. The figure shifted, and I caught a glimpse of matted hair, smudged skin, and a wild glint in wide eyes that reflected my own terror back at me. "You left us," the voice gasped, rasping like gravel, echoing through the silence. "You left me." I trembled, stepping back instinctively, the realization crashing over me like icy water. I staggered away, feeling the door frame solid against my back. "Get away from me!" I shouted, panic lacing my words as I struggled to find my footing in the chaos. But the figure only crawled closer, its voice a haunting whisper that filled the space. "I came back for you. You can't leave again." Something inside me snapped, and I turned to flee, racing up the stairs, the darkness clawing at my heels, desperate to reclaim me. As I slammed the basement door shut, I could still hear the twisted whispers curling through the cracks, echoing in my mind, leaving me to wonder if I would ever feel safe in my house again. As I turned the corner onto my street, the sun dipped behind the trees, casting elongated shadows across the pavement. The warmth of the early autumn day lingered in the air, but a shiver ran down my spine. I noticed a car I did not recognize parked in front of my house, its dark paint gleaming ominously in the fading light. My heart raced, each beat echoing the anxious whispers of my thoughts. I pulled my keys from my bag, their metallic clinking punctuating the eerie silence that enveloped my surroundings. The front door stood slightly ajar, a small gap that seemed to breathe with the shadows of the evening. A rush of adrenaline surged through me, and instinctively, I stepped back, my breath caught in my throat. Had I forgotten to lock it? The thought felt foolish, but as I peered closer, I felt the gnawing dread creep into my bones. I glanced back at the strange car. A dark sedan, its windows tinted, offering no clues to its occupant. My mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps a neighbor needed help, or maybe it was a delivery I had forgotten about. Yet, the feeling that something was wrong tightened within me like a vice. Cautiously, I pushed the door open further, the hinges creaking softly as if warning me of what lay ahead. The interior was cloaked in shadows, the pale light from the hall barely illuminating the living room. I called out, my voice a hesitant whisper. "Hello?" The only response was the faint echo of my own voice fading into the stillness. With slow, measured steps, I ventured inside. The air felt thick, almost charged, as if the very walls were holding their breath. I glanced toward the staircase, leading down to the basement, dark and foreboding. That was when I heard it, a whispering, barely audible but chilling enough to send a tremor through my core. "Jenna," the name drifted up from the depths below, a voice as soft as a sigh yet unmistakably sinister. My heart pounded, its rhythm a war drum in my ears. Who was down there? I was alone. I had to be. I had returned from work to the solitude I cherished, not to a strange visitor lurking in the dark. Drawing a shaky breath, I forced myself to move toward the staircase, each step feeling like a betrayal of my instincts. The whispers grew clearer, layered with urgency and something I couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Anger? I hesitated at the top, my hand resting against the banister, fingers trembling. "Help! Jenna," the voice implored, the familiar name twisting in my gut. I wanted to turn and run, but something anchored me in place, some morbid curiosity mingled with dread. What could possibly be waiting for me below? I descended slowly, each creak of the stairs echoing like a gunshot in the silence. As I reached the bottom, I felt the air change thicker, colder, and infused with a sense of impending doom. The whispering faded to a hush, leaving only the sound of my own ragged breath as I stood on the landing, staring into the darkness of the basement. "Is anyone there?" I called, my voice barely above a whisper, swallowed whole by the shadows. The only response was the soft rustle of something shifting in the dark. My pulse quickened, a wild rhythm echoing the inner chaos as I fumbled in my bag for my phone, the light from the screen cutting through the darkness like a knife. When the beam illuminated the basement, it revealed nothing more than tangled boxes and scattered tools. I stepped further in, the beam of my phone trembling as I swept it across the space. Cobwebs hummed from the ceiling, and the air smelled stale, untouched. Then, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I spun around, shining the light toward the far corner of the basement. There, amid the shadows, stood a figure, a person, or what looked like a person, shrouded in darkness. My heart stuttered, the fear coiling around me like a serpent. "Who are you?" I demanded, the bravado in my voice almost palpable despite the terror brewing within me. The figure didn't answer, but a sinister smile spread across their face, illuminating the features that were obscured in the gloom. Their eyes glinted like shards of glass, sharp and unyielding, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Waiting for you," they finally replied, their voice resonating with a strange familiarity that sent waves of nausea through me. It twisted within me like a knife. I stumbled back, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I considered my options. I had to get out of there. I turned, sprinting toward the stairs, only to feel the heavy weight of the figure behind me closing in. Their breath brushed against my neck, cold and suffocating. "Jenna," the whisper curled around my name, a snake coiling tighter, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I burst up the stairs, my heart pounding louder than the heavy footsteps that followed me. I reached the top and slammed the door behind me, locking it with trembling hands. My thoughts raced as I leaned against the barrier, chest heaving. What had happened? Who was that person? I backed away from the door, glancing around the dimly lit living room, desperately seeking a weapon, anything to defend myself. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind, filled with questions and dread. I couldn't stay here. I had to leave. The whispers still echoed in my mind as I grabbed my keys and bolted for the front door, ready to face whatever nightmare lay outside. Story 2, Into the Woods, The Kindness of Strangers. The sun hung low in the sky as I set out on the trail, bathing the forest in a warm golden hue that felt almost welcoming. I had decided to take a break from the city's chaos and venture into the solitude of the woods, hoping to find clarity amid the towering pines and the rustling leaves. Little did I know that the serenity I craved would soon dissolve into something entirely different. The air was crisp as I hiked deeper into the wilderness, the trail narrowing and twisting like a living thing. My feet crunched over the fallen leaves, and the scent of damp earth filled my lungs. I felt isolated but peaceful, a part of something larger than myself. Yet, as the trees grew denser, shadows pulled around me, and the serenity began to feel more like a shroud. After an hour of hiking, I noticed that the path had become less defined. I'd meant to follow the marked trail, but the signs seemed to have vanished. I pulled out my phone to check the GPS, only to find that there was no signal. I cursed under my breath, a knot beginning to form in my stomach. Had I wandered off course? I took a deep breath and pushed forward, hoping to stumble upon a clearing or signpost that would help me regain my bearings. That was when I first spotted him, a figure emerging from the underbrush. He was tall, dressed in a worn flannel shirt, and his hair hung in unruly curls around his face. My first instinct was to be cautious, to keep my distance. But he smiled, and the warmth of his expression momentarily eased my unease. "Hey there," he called, waving a hand. "Lost?" "Ah, kind of," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'm trying to find my way back to the main trail." "I can help with that. I know these woods like the back of my hand," he said, his voice smooth and inviting. "Where were you headed?" I hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. Yet, the thought of wandering aimlessly was less appealing than the prospect of having company. "I think it's the North Trail," I finally said. "Ah, that's a bit of a trek from here," he replied, stepping closer. I'm headed that way myself. Why don't you join me? Something about the way he leaned in felt off, but I nodded anyway, needing the reassurance of another presence. Together we walked in silence for a while, the occasional crack of a twig beneath our feet breaking the stillness. I tried to focus on the beauty of the forest, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a mistake. As we walked, I observed him more closely. He was chatty, sharing stories of his own hikes, but there was an intensity to his gaze that unnerved me. It felt as if he were sizing me up, measuring my reactions to his words. I forced a laugh at his jokes, but the laughter felt hollow in my chest. "Do you often hike alone?" he asked suddenly, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Not really," I admitted, glancing at him. "I usually go with friends." He nodded, but his eyes darkened slightly. "It's dangerous out here, you know. People get lost." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. A chill crept down my spine. Right. I guess I wasn't thinking. He chuckled, a sound that sent shivers through me. "No one ever thinks they'll get lost. I can show you a shortcut if you'd like." "Shortcut?" I echoed, my heart racing. "Aren't we supposed to stay on the trail?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Trails are overrated. Trust me, I've navigated these woods 100 times. The shortcut will get us there faster." I hesitated, my instinct screaming at me to turn back. Yet, I felt trapped by curiosity and his steady presence beside me. "Okay, let's do it," I said, forcing confidence into my voice. He led the way, and I followed, the trees closing in around us like silent sentinels. The underbrush thickened, and the sounds of the forest shifted. The birds that had once played in the branches fell silent, leaving only the sound of our footsteps echoing in the suffocating stillness. After a few minutes, I began to notice his behavior changing. He glanced over his shoulder more frequently, as if he were checking to see if anyone was following us, or perhaps, if I was still there. The friendly facade began to crack, revealing a more erratic energy lurking beneath. The light-hearted chatter had faded, replaced by an unsettling tension. "Are we close?" I asked, unable to keep the tremor from my voice. "Just a little further," he replied, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. Instead, his gaze was focused on the darkness ahead, and the smile on his face had transformed into something more predatory. The trees loomed taller, the shadows deeper. A sense of dread washed over me as the realization sank in that I had allowed myself to be led away from safety. The path behind us was all but gone, swallowed by the dense undergrowth. I took a step back. Maybe I should head back now. He turned suddenly, blocking my path. "You don't want to do that," he said, his voice low and heavy. "Trust me, I know what's best for you." Panic surged through me. I needed to escape, to break free from his grasp. I glanced around, searching for a route back, but the woods were now a labyrinth of shadows and uncertainty. I'd really like to go back," I stammered, my heart racing. The smile returned, but this time it was devoid of warmth. "You came out here for solitude, didn't you? Let's embrace it. Just you and me." And in that moment, the woods didn't feel like a refuge anymore. They loomed around me, suffocating in dark, and the man before me morphed into something far more sinister than I had ever anticipated. I pressed on through the underbrush, the branches snapping beneath my feet as I followed the narrow trail, now almost unrecognizable. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the forest itself conspired to weigh me down. I glanced back, half expecting to see the stranger looming behind me. But he was nowhere in sight, and for a moment, I convinced myself that he had simply vanished into the woods. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that whispered secrets among the trees. I could still remember the way he had approached me, his smile disarming and his voice warm. "You look lost," he had said, glancing at the map that had already begun to crumple in my sweaty palms. "I know this area well. I can help you find your way back." At first, I was relieved. The initial pang of dread faded as I nodded and allowed him to lead the way. His name was Peter, or at least that's what he had told me. He wore a worn plaid shirt, frayed at the edges, and thick boots that thudded purposefully against the ground. I had felt foolish for not being able to find my way, and his presence comforted me, even though I was hiking alone for a reason, my own escape from the chaotic city life. As we ventured deeper into the woods, the chatter of the birds began to fade. The air grew thick with an uneasy silence. I searched Peter's face for a glimpse of reassurance, but his eyes had taken on an unsettling intensity, as if he were fixated on a goal far beyond my understanding. "Right this way," he said, gesturing with an exaggerated flourish. I followed, though my heart pounded in my chest. The trees began to grow denser, their branches entwining like bony fingers blocking out the light. My instinct screamed at me that something was wrong, but what could I say? I was a stranger myself, and it was only polite to accept help. I tried to engage him in conversation, to distract myself from the gnawing feeling in my gut. "So, how long have you been hiking out here?" I asked, forcing a casual tone. He chuckled softly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, long enough to have seen things most people wouldn't believe," he replied cryptically. A chill crept down my spine, and I glanced around, reassessing the winding path we were taking. The trees began to feel like sentinels, watching my every move. I quickened my pace slightly, trying to keep my distance without appearing rude. It was a delicate balance, one I wasn't sure I could manage if his demeanor continued to shift. Then, out of nowhere, he abruptly stopped. I nearly collided with him. "You see that?" he asked, pointing into the distance where the trees parted slightly, revealing a small clearing. "What?" I asked, straining to see what he saw. My eyes darted to the space he indicated, but it looked ordinary, a patch of grass, perhaps a few wildflowers. "Just a little further. There's something special there. Trust me." His voice was now laced with an urgency that sent my heart racing. "Trust him." The words echoed ominously in my mind. My body tensed as unease twisted within me. I wanted to run, yet I felt rooted to the spot, the forest closing in, isolating me. "We should keep moving," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Peter's expression darkened. "You don't want to miss it," he insisted, his tone shifting from friendly to something colder. I looked around, the forest now looming oppressively. "I think I'll head back," I managed, my breath quickening. His eyes flashed with something inscrutable, a flicker of rage or desperation, and then just as quickly, it was gone. He smiled again, but it felt more like a mask than a gesture of goodwill. "You really shouldn't be out here alone. It's easy to get lost," he said, his voice deceptively soothing. "I'll be fine. I'll find my way," I stammered, the conviction in my words wavering as I stepped back. But Peter moved closer, invading my space. "You don't understand. The forest has its ways." He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "It doesn't like intruders." My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears. I turned quickly, adrenaline surging as I pushed past him, desperate to put distance between us. I needed to get back to the path, to the certainty of the known. "Wait," he called after me, but I didn't look back. I ran, the leaves crunching beneath my feet, the branches slashing at my arms. Panic surged, forcing me to navigate through a labyrinth of trees, the shadows thickening as the light began to fade. In the distance, I could still hear his voice, but it was altered, twisted, echoing through the woods as if the forest itself was taunting me. I stumbled, catching myself against a tree, gasping for breath. I had to fight the urge to scream. My senses heightened, every snap of a twig sent my pulse racing. I had to reach the trail, the clearing could wait. I glanced back once, and saw him standing still, a dark silhouette against the dimming light, watching me. I couldn't shake the feeling that he had always been one step ahead, leading me into a nightmare I could not escape. With every ounce of determination, I launched myself forward, fear propelling me as the forest whispered around me. The weight of dread hung in the air, an invisible force pushing me deeper into its deceptive embrace. I needed to find my way out before it claimed me. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced among the trees as I trudged deeper into the woods. Each step felt heavier, the branches clawing at my jacket as if trying to pull me back. I had ventured off the beaten path, lured by the promise of solitude and the thrill of discovery, but now anxiety gnawed at me, sharp and insistent. I had lost track of time, and the sense of isolation was thickening around me like fog. When I'd first encountered the stranger, I had felt an instant wave of relief. He stood at the base of a gnarled oak, his figure silhouetted against the fading light. His smile was disarming, a wide and genuine thing that made me lower my guard. "You look a bit lost," he had said, hands shoved deep in his pockets. His voice was warm, lacking the hint of menace that my instincts had begun to scream about. "Yeah, I'm trying to find my way back," I replied, my voice shaky as I attempted to maintain a semblance of confidence. "I didn't mean to stray so far." "Not many do," he said, a laugh bubbling up that seemed strangely out of place. "The woods can be deceptive. I can help you if you want." At that moment, I should have turned back. A pang of caution flickered in my gut, but I was too exhausted, too eager for companionship. I nodded and fell into step beside him, hoping his presence would banish the growing dread that had settled into my bones. As we walked, I tried to engage him in conversation. I asked about the trails and his favorite spots in the forest. He answered readily, his tales animated and full of life. But with each passing minute, I noticed small things. The way his laughter had a nervous edge, how his gaze darted toward the horizon as if it held some unspoken secret. Shadows lurked in his eyes, and I began to feel like an intruder on his thoughts. "It's easy to lose track of time out here," he said, glancing at me, his smile faltering for just a moment. "Most people don't understand the woods. They think they can just walk in and out like it's some kind of playground." His words hung in the air, heavy with an unsettling implication. I felt a chill creep down my spine, and when I looked around, the trees felt closer, their trunks looming like sentinels. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves overhead, the whispers of the forest surrounding us. The path, once familiar, now seemed to twist and turn, leading us deeper into the thicket. "Are you sure we're going the right way?" I asked, trying to inject some clarity into the conversation. "Oh, definitely," he replied too quickly, his voice losing its earlier warmth. "Trust me. I know these woods better than anyone." He chuckled again, but this time it sounded forced, like a mask slipping. An unsettling silence followed, one that stretched too long and made my heart race. I quickened my pace, but he matched me effortlessly, his strides long and purposeful. He began to recount tales of hikers who had vanished, their cries echoing in the darkness. His words sank in like daggers. I tried to laugh it off, dismissing it as morbid humor, but when I glanced at him, his eyes sparkled with a strange fervor that turned my stomach. "It's exhilarating, you know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Being lost in the woods. The thrill of the unknown. Most people can't handle it." His gaze bore into me, a challenge hidden beneath layers of charm. "But you're not like them, are you?" I hesitated, caught between the urge to reassure him and the instinct to run. "I just want to get back to my car," I managed to say, my throat dry as the words fell like stones. "Of course," he said, his smile returning, but it felt like a mask. "Just a little further." The trees seemed to close in around us, branches intertwining overhead, blocking out the last remnants of sunlight. My pulse quickened, and I felt an urgency rising within me. I needed to escape, but the thought of sprinting away felt childish and irrational. "Maybe we should turn back," I suggested, my voice trembling slightly. He stopped suddenly, pivoting to face me. The friendly facade shattered for an instant, revealing something wild and unhinged behind his eyes. "You don't want to do that," he warned, teeth gritted in a smile that showed too much. "We're almost there." "Where?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The air crackled with tension, and I felt it, the primal instinct to flee coursing through my veins. "Somewhere special," he replied, his tone low and inviting, but it sent a jolt of fear through me. I took a step back, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. I thought of my phone, the comforting glow of a screen that now felt like a distant dream. "I really need to go," I said, my words coming out faster now. He took a step forward, and I stumbled back instinctively. "You'll regret it if you do," he warned, his voice dropping to a low hiss. "They won't let you leave." In that moment, the reality of my situation hit me like a tidal wave. The woods had transformed into a living entity, a maze designed to ensnare me. Panic surged within me, and I turned on my heel, running. The sound of my heart pounding drowned out everything else. I could feel his presence behind me, a predator stalking its prey. With branches whipping against my face, I sprinted down the path, desperation fueling my legs. The trees loomed ominously, twisting as I ran, the certainty of my direction slipping away. Behind me, the stranger laughed, a sound that echoed in the hollow silence of the woods, and it was a laugh devoid of humanity. I ran until my lungs burned, until the world blurred around me. I had to escape. I had to find my way back. But the woods, alive and hungry, had other plans. The sun had begun its slow descent beneath the horizon, casting long shadows that danced wickedly among the gnarled trees. I could feel the shift in the air, the temperature dropping, the forest around me growing eerily quiet. I glanced at the stranger as we walked, still grappling with the gnawing feeling in my gut. The man had introduced himself as Ethan, his smile wide and disarming, but there was something unsettling about how quickly he had appeared. I had thought him harmless, but beneath his friendly exterior, I sensed a darkness lurking just out of sight. "Not much further," Ethan said, his voice amiable, yet somehow strained, like a frayed string on a violin. He led the way, occasionally glancing over his shoulder, his brown eyes glinting oddly in the waning light. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely convinced. Every step I took felt like it was pulling me deeper into an unseen trap. We had been walking for what felt like hours, though I had no way to measure time in this shadowed labyrinth. I recalled the winding paths I had taken, the reassuring chirping of crickets that now lay stilled. "Do you hike here often?" I asked, trying to maintain a conversational thread, though my heart thudded in anxiety. "Yeah, it's my escape." He shrugged, pushing back a stray lock of hair that fell across his forehead. "You know how it is. The noise of the world can drive a person mad." His voice had a poet's lilt, but the words seemed to carry a weight that pressed upon me. "Right. Just looking for a bit of peace," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. I had come here to clear my head, to step away from the chaos of my life, but this was not what I had envisioned. "You're familiar with these trails, then?" "More than most." There was a fleeting shadow that passed over his face, something sharp and jagged that made me shiver. "I know the backwoods real well." I studied him, those kind eyes suddenly seeming less inviting, more predatory. The way he held his posture, even now as we walked, made me uneasy. It felt as though he was gauging my reactions, weighing my fear against some unfathomable motive. Should we head back? I suggested, forcing my voice to remain steady. I think I've wandered far enough. He stopped abruptly and turned to face me, his expression shifting from congenial to something more intense. You're not in any hurry, are you? The best parts of the woods are just ahead. His words dripped like honey, sweet and thick, but the undertone was enough to send a shiver racing down my spine. I hesitated, my instinct screaming that I was being lured. Actually, I should really be going, I said more firmly now, stepping back. The forest seemed to shift around me, the shadows lengthening and spreading like ink on paper. I appreciate your help, but I think I'll find my way from here. Ethan's expression soured, just a fraction, but it was enough for me to take a step back. You don't want to go that way. His tone was deceptively calm, but the glint in his eyes told of something darker. The trails can be confusing, especially when it gets dark. You might get lost. You wouldn't want that, would you? A chill crept up my spine as I forced myself to turn and head back the way we had come. The forest felt different now, oppressive, the trees closing in as if they were alive and aware. I glanced back at Ethan, but he had fallen silent, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Hey, man, look. I called over my shoulder, trying to sound casual despite the rising panic. I appreciate your concern, but I really think I can manage from here. He didn't respond. I quickened my pace, the ground crunching beneath my feet unnaturally loud in the thickening silence. Every instinct told me to keep moving, but fear's grip tightened around my throat. I could hear him following, the rustle of leaves and the snapping of twigs beneath his boots, a sinister cadence trailing behind me. I turned to face him, determination surging through me. If you want to help me, just tell me how to get back. I shouted, my voice echoing into the suffocating gloom. He stopped, a crooked smile creeping over his face again, but it didn't reach his eyes. I can take you back. It's not far. No. My words fell short as I caught movement from the corner of my eye. A flash of dark fur slipped between the trees. Was it an animal? A trick of the light? I felt my heart race again, urging me to flee. But I could sense Ethan's presence closer now. He had moved forward, edging toward me with an unsettling calm. You really don't want to be alone in the woods at night, he said, almost soothingly. I took a deep breath, gathering my resolve, and turned to run. The forest erupted around me, branches reaching out like skeletal hands as I navigated the thinning light. I could hear Ethan's footsteps pounding behind me, gaining ground with every desperate stride. Panic surged through me. I could not be lost, it couldn't end like this. I stumbled forward, pushing through the underbrush, the world narrowing down to a singular focus, escape. I didn't dare look back, I felt his presence hot on my heels, a predator stalking its prey. As I ran, I caught sight of something ahead, an opening, perhaps a clearing. But the realization came too late. I had lost all sense of direction, and the treachery of the forest closed in around me, isolating me in the dark, where shadows lurked and innocence turned to fear. The sun hung low in the sky, casting elongated shadows that crept like secrets through the trees. I had been wandering for hours, the tranquility of the forest now feeling increasingly suffocating. I had ventured out to escape the clamor of my daily life, thinking solitude would bring clarity. Instead, I felt disoriented, the paths twisting and turning until I could no longer recognize any familiar markers. That was when I stumbled upon him. He stood at the junction of two trails, a lopsided grin on his face. His clothes were rumpled, and his hair hung in uneven wisps as if he had been wrestling with the wind. I immediately sensed something was off, but desperation made me overlook my instincts. Lost, are you? He asked, his voice a gravelly hum that seemed to blend into the rustling leaves. Just a bit, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. I've been hiking for a while and I think I took a wrong turn. Don't worry. I know these woods like the back of my hand, he said, stepping toward me with an infectious enthusiasm that felt out of place. Come on, I'll help you find your way back. I hesitated, glancing back down the path I had come. His friendly demeanor pulled at my reluctance, and I found myself nodding. Thanks, I would appreciate that. We started walking, the sound of our footsteps merging into a soft rhythm against the forest floor. At first, his conversation flowed easily. He spoke of the trees, the wildlife, and the hidden gems of the forest I had yet to discover. I forced a smile, attempting to match his easygoing demeanor, but unease knotted in my stomach. As we moved deeper into the woods, the landscape changed. Shadows thickened, and the sun began to slip behind the trees. We should be careful, I said, my voice betraying my growing anxiety. I don't want to get caught out here in the dark. Oh, it's still plenty light, he replied, his laughter echoing eerily. Trust me, you'll love where I'm taking you. It's a special spot. His words sent a chill down my spine. The energy around him shifted. It felt like a tempest gathering behind a calm facade. I quickened my pace, matching his strides, but I focused less on the trail ahead and more on the man beside me. His eyes seemed to glint with an unsettling mirth, and when he smiled, the corners of his mouth creased in a way that made my heart race. What's your name? I asked, trying to divert my thoughts. Call me Sam, he said, his gaze fixated ahead. But I'm not important. This place is. It's magical if you know where to look. I nodded, forcing the words from my throat. Magical, right. The trail narrowed, the trees closing in around us like sentinels. A whisper of wind passed through the branches, and for a brief moment, I thought I heard laughter, not ours, but something distant and cruel. I tried to shake off the feeling, reminding myself that it was just the wind, that it was just the forest playing tricks. Are you sure we're going the right way? I ventured, my voice laced with uncertainty. Absolutely, he replied too quickly, his enthusiasm now a jarring contrast to the tightening silence around us. Just a little further. The path sloped downhill, and I clutched the rough bark of a nearby tree for balance. The air grew colder, a damp chill that seeped into my bones. I noticed Sam's demeanor shift. His explanations became fragmented, his laughter more sporadic, like dry leaves skittering across the forest floor. I could no longer ignore the sinking feeling that I was being led astray. Are you sure you're not lost too? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Lost? No, he replied, his smile faltering for the first time. You might be, though. I felt a swell of panic bubble inside me. Maybe we should just head back. Sam stopped suddenly, turning to face me with an intensity that froze the words in my throat. Back? But we're almost there. You'll love it, I promise. There was a flicker of something dark in his eyes, a fleeting shadow that made my skin prickle. No, really, I think. But before I could finish, he grabbed my arm tightly, the grip startlingly strong. You need to trust me. There's so much beauty ahead. I yanked my arm away, adrenaline kicking in. Let go of me. His eyes widened, a strange mix of surprise and anger flashing across his face. For a moment, he looked almost vulnerable, but in the next instant, he was back to that infectious grin, though it now seemed forced. You don't understand, he said, his voice low and urgent. I can't let you leave yet. The forest loomed, the shadows deepening as I took a step back, heart pounding. I turned, searching for the path back, but all traces of familiarity had vanished. The trees stood like silent witnesses as I felt the weight of his stare on my back, the air thick with unspoken threats. "Sam," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I think I need to go." "Why would you want to do that?" he asked, his tone shifting, simmering with an unholy glee. "It's only just beginning." I turned and ran, plunging deeper into the woods, branches clawing at my clothes as I fought my way through the suffocating darkness. The laughter echoed behind me, haunting and echoing, as the forest swallowed the last vestiges of daylight. I had come seeking solace, but now I was lost in a nightmare, and I had no idea how to wake up. Story 3: Whispers in the Dark. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, casting a cold, sterile glow across the empty corridors of St. Mary's Hospital. It was nearing midnight, and the rhythmic beeping of monitors blended into a monotonous lullaby, one that often lulled me into a false sense of security. I had settled into my routine as a night nurse, the world quieting down around me while the patients slept, blissfully unaware of the shift change that came with the darkness. It was supposed to be just another night, but the air felt different that evening, charged with an unnameable tension. I pushed my hair back, tucking it behind my ear as I checked the chart of my patient in room 203. Mrs. Keller was a sweet, elderly woman, her frail body battling pneumonia. She had been on my watch for a few nights now, and I had grown fond of her stories about the town before the hospital was built, tales that felt like whispers of the past echoing through time. I smiled at her, and she returned the gesture, her eyes crinkling under the dim light. "You're looking tired, dear," she said, her voice a warm rasp. "You should take a break." I chuckled lightly, feeling the weight of sleep creeping into my bones. "I'll be fine, Mrs. Keller. Just a few more hours." As I moved toward the nurse's station, the phone rang, slicing through the quiet like a serrated knife. I hesitated, glancing at the clock at 12:15 a.m. The hospital knew better than to call at this hour unless it was urgent. I picked up the receiver, my heart racing with an unshakable feeling of foreboding. "St. Mary's Hospital, night shift. How can I help you?" I tried to sound professional, but my voice trembled slightly. Silence. The kind that seemed to stretch on forever, heavy and oppressive. Just as I was about to hang up, I heard it, a slow, deliberate breath on the other end of the line. It stole the air from my lungs, and I gripped the phone tighter. "Hello?" I asked, a hint of panic seeping into my words. The breathing continued, deep and ragged, and then it stopped as abruptly as it had begun. I pulled the phone away, staring at it as if it were a venomous snake. Had this been a prank? I rolled my eyes at the thought. Surely no one would be cruel enough to do that to a nurse working the night shift. Trying to shake off the unease, I logged into the computer and pulled up the night's charts, but my concentration was shattered. A chill crept down my spine as I glanced down the dimly lit corridor, the shadows pooling in the corners like dark water. Something felt wrong. I glanced back at my phone, its soft beep mocking me as it lay idle. I spent the next hour checking on patients, trying to drown out the uneasiness with routine. Mrs. Keller had fallen asleep, her soft snoring filling the room. I forced myself to check on the others. Mr. Thompson in 205 was stable, and the mother in 207 had a newborn that was sleeping peacefully. But no matter how busy I tried to keep myself, the heavy silence was deafening. At 1:30 a.m., the phone rang again. My heart raced in response, the dread echoing in my ears as I answered. "St. Mary's Hospital, night shift," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The breathing returned, closer this time, almost as if the caller were sitting in the shadows just outside my door. I felt my stomach lurch, and I pulled my chair closer to the desk, gazing around the empty waiting area. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Just watching," came a whisper, barely audible, yet it slithered down my spine like icy fingers. The line went dead. I dropped the receiver, my breath quickening as I felt the adrenaline surge through me. "Who was this?" Why were they doing this? I locked the door to the nurse's station, feeling foolish yet compelled to protect myself. I paced, trying to calm the flutter of panic in my chest. As the clock ticked toward 2 a.m., I was alone in the oppressive silence, the shadows in the hallway seeming to stretch and grow denser. I felt like a rabbit under a hawk's gaze, waiting for the inevitable strike. The phone rang again, and I hesitated, dread coiling tightly in my throat. I picked it up, steeling myself for whatever was about to happen. "Is this a joke?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Because it's not funny." "Have you checked the back hallway?" the voice rasped, dripping with malice. I froze, the words chilling me to the bone. My mind raced back to the layout of the hospital. The back hallway connected to the emergency wing, a seldom used area that felt infinite in the dark. Before I could respond, the call ended, leaving me deafened by the absence of sound. The sudden silence was overwhelming, and my heart thundered painfully in my chest. I glanced toward the back hallway that was dimly lit by an emergency exit sign. I knew I should stay put, that I should call security or even the police, but the urge to investigate was a siren's call I couldn't resist. Taking a deep breath, I paced toward the light, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but curiosity and fear propelled me forward. I reached the threshold of the back hallway, the shadows dancing against the walls, and stepped inside, the air growing colder as I ventured deeper into the darkness. I strained to listen for any further sounds, but all I could hear was the soft rustle of my scrubs and the pounding of my heart. Fear and adrenaline coursed through me, blurring the line between courage and foolishness. And then I heard it, a faint whisper mingling with the sound of something heavy shifting in the distance. I wasn't alone. Compelled by an instinct I didn't understand, I pressed on, deeper into the dimness, unaware that my night shift was going to become a nightmare far worse than I had ever imagined. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, eerie shadows that danced along the sterile white walls of the hospital. I had grown accustomed to the haunting quiet of the night shift, but now, a different kind of silence seemed to wrap around me like a shroud. I could still hear the echoes of the previous call rattling in my mind. I had dismissed it at first, convinced it was just a prank. The heavy breathing on the other end had unnerved me, but I had chalked it up to a prankster or a restless patient. I should have known better. It was well past midnight when I settled into the nursing station with a cup of stale coffee. The smell of burnt sugar lingered in the air, a remnant of the night before when I had made my usual run to the break room. I glanced at the clock. Time seemed to crawl at night, minutes stretching into hours. I shifted in my chair, feeling restless, as if I were waiting for something to happen. The phone rang, its shrill sound slicing through the oppressive silence. My heart raced as I reached for the receiver, my pulse quickening at the memory of the last call. "Hello?" I said, trying to sound calm. The silence stretched impossibly long before I heard it, a slow, deliberate intake of breath, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone holding back a snicker. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound authoritative. There was no reply, only static that crackled like distant thunder. I hung up, my hands shaking as I placed the receiver back on the cradle. I glanced around the room, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. The hospital was mostly deserted at this hour. The hum of the machines in the ICU was the only thing resembling life beyond the nurse's station. I had come to appreciate the stillness, but tonight it felt like a trap, tightening around me. I tried to shake off the feeling but couldn't help darting my eyes toward the far end of the corridor, where darkness pooled like ink. I forced myself to focus on my duties. I gathered the charts and began my rounds, checking in on patients, ensuring their vitals were stable. The familiar tasks offered a sense of comfort, grounding me in a reality I knew all too well. But as I walked past each room, I felt the oppressive weight of unseen eyes following me, the chill of being watched pricking at the back of my neck. The next hour was uneventful, just the rhythmic beeping of machines and the soft rustle of sheets. Still, that nagging feeling of dread lingered, growing heavier with each passing minute. I returned to the nurse's station, my heart pounding as I passed the dimly lit break room. The shadows seemed to stretch out menacingly, almost reaching for me. I reached for the phone again, desperate to hear a human voice. But as soon as I picked it up, it rang once more. My breath caught in my throat as I answered. "Hello? Did you think I would go away?" It was a whisper, thin and serpentine. The voice sent chills racing down my spine. "Who are you?" My voice was barely a whisper, barely daring to break the fragile air between us. "I'm right here, watching you." The line went dead. I dropped the phone, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The shadowy corners of the room felt alive, shifting and moving as my imagination took hold. I glanced around, the cold reality settling in. I was alone in this vast building, surrounded by patients too sick to notice my fear. I needed to calm down. I forced myself to take a deep breath, reminding myself that I was a professional. But as I gathered my wits, I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't alone. It was as if something dark had seeped into the hospital, blurring the line between the living and the lurking. A sudden crash echoed from the kitchen, shattering the tension in the air. My heart leapt into my throat. I quickly grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and stepped toward the sound. Caution urged me to turn back, but curiosity clawed at me, pushing me forward. I crept down the hallway, each step echoing unnervingly in the stillness. As I approached the kitchen, I noticed the door was ajar, swinging slightly as if someone or something had recently rushed through. I pushed it open, the rusty hinges creaking in protest. The room was dark, the only illumination coming from the flickering lights above. I felt a rush of cold air, sending chills spiraling through me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response. I took a cautious step inside, scanning the area with my flashlight. The cold metal surfaces glinted ominously. Then I saw it, the floor was littered with broken dishes, remnants of someone's careless haste. But there was no sign of another presence. It was quiet, too quiet. I turned to leave when a noise made me freeze. A faint shuffle echoed from the storage room. My breath quickened as I shone the flashlight in the direction of the sound. The beam illuminated the darkened doorway, revealing an unsettling shadow moving just beyond the threshold. I took a step back, my instinct screaming at me to run. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged through my veins as I fumbled to switch the flashlight back on, my hands clammy and slick against the cold metal. When the light finally returned, the flicker revealed the door swinging shut, the darkness swallowing the storage room whole. I bolted back toward the nurse's station, every shadow twisting into something monstrous as I ran. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, a relentless warning that I was not safe. As I reached my station, I slammed the door shut and locked it. I leaned against it, gasping for breath, my mind racing. I had to call someone. I grabbed the phone again, but it rang in response, the shrill sound almost mocking me. "Hello?" I breathed, prepared for whatever awaited me on the other end. Instead, all I heard was the chilling sound of laughter, a low, guttural sound that sent shivers down my spine. I hung up, realizing I was trapped within these walls, hunted by something unseen. My world narrowed to the small, flickering lamp on the desk, a fragile light in an ocean of darkness. The shadows pressed closer, and I understood this was only the beginning. The fluorescent lights above flickered ominously as I made my way down the dimly lit corridor, the stark white walls seemingly closing in around me. Shadows danced along the floor, cast by the swing of my scrub-clad legs. It was just past midnight, and as the night shift stretched on, the hospital settled into a familiar but eerie stillness. My heart raced more from the unsettling quiet than from the exhaustion that had begun to gnaw at my bones. I had signed up for nights, thinking I could handle the solitude and the late hours. The whispers of restless spirits in the hospital's older sections had always intrigued me. I had dismissed the tales of ghosts and shadowy figures as mere folklore until the phone call started. The first call had come just a few nights ago. I'd been in the supply room, restocking gauze. It was an ordinary evening, or so I thought. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I fished it out, expecting a message from one of my colleagues. Instead, I was met with a suffocating silence. I had held my breath, waiting for a voice, but all I heard was heavy breathing. It had been disconcerting, and I had chalked it up to a prank. But it hadn't stopped there. The calls had escalated. Each night they became more frequent, more menacing. The second night, the voice had been raspy, almost a whisper, and it taunted me, repeating my name in a mocking cadence. I remembered how I had shivered, looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the specter of my tormentor lurking behind a gurney. Tonight, as I walked into the nurse's station, I felt the weight of my dread settle like a stone in my stomach. I glanced at the clock, 12:21 a.m. The night was still young, and already I felt the gnawing anxiety rising within me. I poured myself a cup of bitter coffee, hoping the caffeine would help me stave off the fatigue. The night shifts were long, but I had always been able to cope with the solitude. Now, however, it felt like the very air around me pulsed with tension. With the phone in my pocket, I tried to focus on my duties. I checked the charts of the lightly snoring patients, peered into the examination rooms, and even made my rounds in the ICU. Each step echoed hauntingly in the sterile white halls. The silence was deafening. Around 1 a.m., just as I settled into a rhythm, my phone buzzed again. My heart dropped as I recognized the number on the screen, unknown. I hesitated, caught between instinct and curiosity. I answered, my voice shaky. "Hello?" Heavy breathing filled my ear, as familiar as it was chilling. My stomach twisted. I opened my mouth to speak, but the voice cut through the silence, a low, guttural hiss. "I see you." Panic surged through me. I slammed the phone down, wild-eyed, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I surged into the hallway, looking for someone. I called out, half expecting to see a fellow nurse or a doctor step around the corner, but the corridor remained empty. The shadows loomed like shadows always do, earnest yet mocking. I returned to the nurse's station, my hands trembling as I reached for the desk phone to report the threats, but I couldn't bring myself to dial. What would I say? That I was afraid of a phantom voice. The darkness felt wrapped around me, as if I were in an ethereal grasp. As I sat there, trying to gather my thoughts, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye caught my attention. I turned sharply, expecting to see someone, but the hallway was deserted. My heart raced, and the flickering lights cast a long shadow that seemed to stretch toward me. The phone buzzed again. I recoiled, instinctively clutching the edge of the desk. This time, I didn't answer. I watched as the screen displayed the same unknown number. I was trapped in a cycle of anxiety, teetering on the brink of madness. I could feel the darkness accumulating, an almost tangible force pulling tightly around me. I couldn't stay here, not alone. Gathering my resolve, I grabbed my flashlight and made my way toward the utility closet, where I kept extra supplies. The hallway stretched before me, the lights buzzing with a life of their own. As I approached, a shadow flitted across the far end of the corridor. My heart stopped. I turned on my flashlight, illuminating the area ahead. The beam sliced through the darkness, revealing nothing but the expanse of faded linoleum and the occasional faded poster clinging to the walls. I took a deep breath, trying to dismiss the notion that someone was stalking me from the shadows, but the weight of the threat felt real. Years of training had ingrained in me the need to stay calm, but I felt the prickles of fear crawling up my spine. Just as I reached the door of the closet, my phone buzzed again, its shrill tone echoing in the cavernous silence, shattering any semblance of calm. I stumbled, barely managing to grab the handle of the door to steady myself. My breath quickened as the tread coiled tighter around me. I pushed open the closet door and stepped inside, the musty air filling my lungs. I pressed myself against the wall, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. I fought against the urge to scream, to call out for help. Instead, I held my breath, listening, waiting for the sound that haunted my nights. Then, I heard it, a soft footfall in the hall. The unmistakable sound of someone moving, deliberately, slowly. My heart thundered in my chest. I pressed my back against the cold metal shelves, waiting to see if I was truly alone or if I had drawn the attention of someone lurking in the shadows. The breathing echoed in my mind, relentless and invasive. I had to find a way out of this nightmare. But in that moment, all I could think of was the fear gnawing at me, the haunting knowledge that something was watching me from the dark. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, casting a sickly glow in the small supply room I had retreated to. It was a cramped space, filled with boxes of gloves, gauze, and an assortment of medical supplies that had long since expired. The faint buzz of the overhead lights mingled with the distant sounds of the hospital, an echoing heart monitor, the soft shuffle of a nurse's shoes against linoleum, the occasional wheeze of the HVAC system. But underneath it all, the atmosphere felt different, heavy with an energy that left me on edge. I hadn't expected the calls to come again so soon. However, just a few hours into my shift, when I was knee-deep in charts, my phone buzzed on the counter beside me, the screen illuminating a number I didn't recognize. My heart raced as I answered, half hoping it was a fellow nurse checking in on me. "Who is this?" I demanded, but all I received in return was a slow, deliberate breath, filled with something sinister. My skin prickled. I hung up, attempting to shake off the feeling that someone was purposefully toying with me. The calls had begun 2 nights ago. At first, it had just been heavy breathing, rhythmic and unsettling, but last night had escalated. I could still hear the grating voice in my ear, its taunts echoing in my mind. "I see you," it had whispered, the words slithering down my spine like ice. I felt exposed, vulnerable under the scrutiny of something unseen. After the call, I stepped out of the supply closet, gripping the phone like a lifeline. My footsteps echoed down the empty corridor as I tried to focus on my responsibilities. The hospital felt different at night. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and the silence seemed too loud. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to find someone lingering in the darkness, watching me. I pushed through the double doors leading to the nurse's station, the familiar buzz of my colleagues wrapped in conversation grounding me, if only slightly. They were gossiping about a patient in room 203, a sweet old man who had taken a turn for the worse. "How long do you think he's got?" one of them asked, her voice low but laced with curiosity. "Who knows?" another replied, leaning against the counter with a sigh. "I heard he's been asking for his wife. Might be a sign he knows it's time." I forced a smile, even though the conversation made a pit form in my stomach. Patients didn't just slip away, they left pieces of themselves behind, haunting the halls like echoes in a ghost story. I busied myself with tasks, filing paperwork, checking vitals, all the while glancing at the clock, waiting for the next hour to roll by. When the calls came again, I was alone in the break room, pouring a cup of coffee that did little to chase away the fatigue clinging to me like a second skin. My phone vibrated viciously against the table, and I felt my stomach drop. I hesitated, but the instinct to answer pulled me in. "What do you want?" I snapped, the tension boiling over. The voice was even lower this time, a gravely whisper that sent chills racing through me. You shouldn't be alone. I can see you. I slammed the phone down, knocking over the coffee cup. The hot liquid spilled like blood on the tile, marred by my panic. I could feel it, the sense of being watched, the weight of someone's gaze pressing down on me. I wanted to run, to hide, but my legs seemed rooted to the floor. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to regain composure. I wiped at the spill with trembling hands, the familiar beeping of the monitors outside the break room doing little to soothe my frayed nerves. I needed to tell someone, but who would believe me? The hospital was a labyrinth of stark white walls, echoing hallways, and patient rooms steeped in dread. It was almost like a character of its own, shifting shapes as the night deepened. I took a few calming breaths and stepped out into the corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering ominously above. I made my way back to my responsibilities, checking on the medication in room 205, attending to the elderly man in 203, but every shadow seemed to shift, every flicker of light a reminder that I was now alone. I reached for the door handle of room 203, my heart pounding in my chest. I pushed it open with a shaky breath. The room was dim, the old man periodically stirring in his sleep. I checked his vitals, my mind racing back to the call, the chilling certainty that someone out there was fixated on me. The moment I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. A figure, fleeting, disappearing into the shadowy hallway beyond. My breath hitched in my throat. I stepped quietly towards the door, peering into the corridor. There was nothing there, just the emptiness of night stretched endlessly before me. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to shake off the paranoia, but the weight of the phone call lingered like a specter. "Get it together," I whispered under my breath, forcing myself to step out into the hallway. But the hall felt treacherous, every corner seemed to hide someone, every flicker of light left me unsettled. I walked faster, my pulse quickening. I needed to find someone to tell, but who would I trust? The distance to the nurse's station felt infinite, and the oppressive darkness closed in, thick and suffocating around me. I rounded the corner and froze. A figure stood at the far end of the hallway, cloaked in shadows. My skin prickled as I squinted, unable to discern their face. I opened my mouth to call out, but no sound came. Instead, I took a step back, instinct overtaking reason, the chill of fear filling my lungs. That was when I felt it, the oppressive weight of presence. I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting an unsettling glow across the empty corridors of St. Augustine's Hospital. It was just past midnight, and the once bustling establishment lay silent, save for the occasional beeping of machines and the faint echo of my footsteps. I had grown accustomed to the eerie stillness during my shifts, but tonight felt different, as if the shadows themselves were alive and breathing. I had returned to my station after checking on Mr. Davis in room 206, an elderly man whose frail body seemed to be losing the battle against time. As I settled into my chair, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me, eyes that belonged to something lurking just out of sight. I took a deep breath, attempting to dispel the creeping dread that turned my stomach into knots. The phone on my desk rang, startling me out of my thoughts. The sound echoed through the quiet like a gunshot in a vacuum. I reached for the receiver, noting the time. It was 12:15 a.m. My heart raced as I answered, half expecting it to be a call for help, another emergency. Instead, I was met with silence, an ominous pause that stretched on until the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing filled the line. "Hello?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but it trembled despite my efforts. The breathing continued, slow and deliberate, a sinister rhythm that sent shivers down my spine. I hung up, my hand shaking as I set the receiver down. I told myself it was just a prank, the result of bored teenagers seeking thrills after dark. But I knew, deep down, that this was more than mere adolescent mischief. Minutes trickled by, each second stretching longer than the last. I focused on organizing charts and cleaning the workstation, anything that would keep my mind occupied. The shadows outside the window deepened, and I stole glances at the doors, half expecting someone to step through, but no one did. At 1:05 a.m., the phone rang again. My breath hitched in my throat. I was tempted to let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. As I answered, the breathing resumed, more labored this time, as if the caller were exerting themselves, savoring my fear. "Who is this?" I demanded, though my voice wavered. No response, only the sound of their heavy breaths filling the void. I slammed the receiver down, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I no longer felt like I was alone in the hospital. I felt hunted. I spent the next hour in a haze, my nerves electrified. I checked on each patient, ensuring they were stable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming for me. When I returned to my station, I found the phone had been knocked askew. I hadn't done that. It sat there, inviting and menacing, as if daring me to pick it up again. At 2:20 a.m., I heard footsteps echoing outside the room. My pulse quickened. It was too late for visitors, and we were in lockdown due to the increased security measures. I peered through the small window in the door, but the corridor was empty. I strained my ears, hoping to catch a whisper, a sound, anything that might ground me. Instead, an icy chill washed over me, and I felt as though the shadows had thickened, standing at the edges of my vision. I took a deep breath and decided to step out. Perhaps a walk would calm my racing heart. As I weaved through the dimly lit halls, the oppressive silence grew heavier. I turned down a familiar corridor, my footsteps the only sound breaking the stillness, but with every step I took, the feeling of being watched intensified. There was a commotion from the nurse's station down the hall, and urgent whispering. I quickened my pace, my heart racing as I approached. Just as I rounded the corner, a light flickered and died, plunging the exit sign into darkness. I froze, my instinct screaming for me to turn back. "Did you hear that?" one of the nurses whispered, her voice tinged with fear. "Yeah, it sounded like someone was out here," another replied, a tremor in her tone. I stepped back, my breath hitching in my throat. The air felt electric, charged with a terrifying energy. I turned to leave when my phone vibrated violently on the counter, a jarring reminder of my loneliness. I reached out, feeling compelled to answer, but a sense of impending doom gripped me. From the corner of my eye, I caught a movement, an apparition darting down the hall. Panic surged through me. I dropped the phone and bolted after it, my instincts taking over as I chased the fleeting shadow. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead, walls closing in around me. I rounded the corner, ready to confront whoever was tormenting me, but the corridor was empty once more. I could hear the soft echo of my steps and the pounding of my heart, but the figure had vanished. I leaned against the wall, panting heavily, desperate for an explanation. A sudden ringtone pierced the stillness, shrill and jarring. I turned to see my phone lying on the floor, the screen illuminating the darkness. I grabbed it, and my heart sank when I saw an unknown number. I answered it, my voice shaking. "Who is this?" "Stop running," a low voice rasped, chilling my blood. "I'm closer than you think." I dropped the phone, its clatter echoing in the silence. My breath quickened, and a primal fear coursed through me. I was not just a nurse in a hospital. I was prey in a game I could not comprehend. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows growing denser, and I knew with every fiber of my being that I was not alone. For the first time that night, I truly understood the horror of my reality. I was being hunted. Story 4, The Haunting Pursuit. The clock on the office wall read 10:27 p.m. as I shut my laptop, blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights that had buzzed over my head for far too long. The office was silent now, the hum of coworkers long gone, leaving only the faint echo of my own footsteps as I made my way to the parking lot. The late hours had become a routine, my escape from the mundane drone of the 9-to-5 grind. But tonight, a nagging sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach as I stepped outside. The air was crisp, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the building. I shivered slightly, wrapping my cardigan tightly around my shoulders as I navigated to my car. My sedan looked lonely in the dim light, its surface glistening with dew from the evening chill. I fumbled for my keys, mindful of the growing darkness around me. The lot was nearly empty, save for a couple of cars parked in the farthest corner, their shapes indistinct under the flickering street lamp. As I started the engine, a shiver of apprehension raced down my spine. It was one of those feelings that I couldn't quite shake off. I told myself it was just fatigue, the long hours blurring my judgment. But as I pulled out of the lot and onto the empty street, I couldn't ignore the nagging sensation that I was being watched. The roads were quiet as I made my way home. The occasional flicker of headlights from a car passing by offered a momentary comfort, but it was fleeting. I turned on the radio, hoping the familiar voices would drown out the unsettling quiet. Then, as I approached the first turn, I noticed headlights behind me, too close. I stole a glance in the rearview mirror, and my heart raced. A car with tinted windows had appeared, trailing me at a distance that felt too deliberate. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles whitening as I pulled into a winding back road. It was a shortcut I often took, the narrow path lined with trees creeping in on both sides, shielding me from the world outside. But instead of relief, the unease intensified. The car followed. My pulse quickened, and I glanced at the rearview mirror again. The headlights remained unwavering. I hit the gas, urging my car to pick up speed, but the vehicle behind me matched my pace. It was as if the driver was anticipating my every move, every twist and turn I made around the curves of the road. I turned sharply onto another side street, the tires squealing against the asphalt. My breath came in quick bursts, panic clawing at my chest. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, urging me to think clearly. I had to lose them. I couldn't let them know where I lived. As I navigated through the darkened streets, each turn felt more desperate than the last. The shadows from the trees seemed to stretch and shift, forming grotesque shapes in the periphery of my vision. I could almost hear the whispers of those who had once walked these roads, stories of lost souls lingering just beyond my consciousness. A glance in the rearview mirror sent chills up my spine. The tinted windows gleamed ominously, reflecting the scant light from the street lamps like an obsidian mask. I cursed under my breath, forcing myself to focus on the road. I had to calm down. I had to think. Taking a deep breath, I turned onto a less traveled road, one that twisted further away from my neighborhood. The further I got, the more hope surged within me. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, heart pounding in my ears. The road was unpaved now, dust kicked up behind me, but I didn't care. I pressed on, desperate to break free from this unseen predator. But as I turned down a particularly dark stretch, a flicker of movement in the rearview mirror caught my eye. The car behind me was closer now, its headlights slicing through the shadows like a knife. Panic settled in my throat. How had they managed to close the distance so quickly? I felt as though I were in a nightmare, where every curve and bend of the road was predestined, and each effort I made only drew them closer. I took a sharp left, my tires skimming the gravel as I glanced in the mirror once more. The driver hadn't lost a beat. I could barely see their face, but there was something unnerving about the stillness in the shadows, an uncanny calm that sent a shiver racing down my spine. Fear crept in, curling around my lungs, squeezing out any rational thought. I was almost home. I knew the streets, the back roads, the shortcuts. I could lose them, I told myself. Just a few more turns, a few more twists, and I could slip into the safety of my driveway and lock the door. But I was wrong. Every turn I took was countered. The following car mirrored my every move, tightening the grip of terror against my chest. I made a final desperate maneuver, racing down a narrow alley, hoping against hope that I could shake them off. But the alley was a dead end. In the silence that enveloped me, I turned the wheel, panic clawing in my throat as I realized I had nowhere to go. I could feel the heat of their headlights blazing down the alleyway, trapping me in its unforgiving glow. The shadows grew thicker, the walls of the alley looming like giants ready to swallow me whole. And then, just as the weight of despair threatened to crush me, the car pulled to a stop behind me. The engine quieted, swallowing the sound of my own heart thudding in my chest. I could barely breathe as I glanced in the mirror, my fear coiling tighter. In that breathless moment, I understood the depth of my helplessness. Whoever was behind those tinted windows, they had me. I was cornered, trapped in the darkness, and the night stretched endlessly before me, a black void where nothing good could emerge. The air in the car felt thick, almost suffocating. Each breath I took seemed to come with a weight, swelling inside my chest as I navigated the winding back roads. The headlights of my small sedan sliced through the darkness like a knife, illuminating the twisted branches that reached out from the side of the road as if trying to pull me in. I stole a nervous glance in the rearview mirror, my heart pounding in rhythm with the ticking clock on the dashboard. The dark shape of the car remained behind me, a menacing specter that refused to fade into the shadows. It had been a long night at work, longer than usual, and I had barely noticed when the clock struck midnight. I was the last one in the office, sorting through files that seemed to multiply by the hour. My mind had been hazy, filled with thoughts of deadlines and the heaviness of unfiled paperwork. It wasn't until I stepped outside, the chill biting my skin, that I realized how isolating the quiet city had become. Now, with the oppressive weight of that car looming in the darkness, I felt as though I was being engulfed by the night. I took a sharp turn onto Maplewood Lane, my tires screeching against the asphalt. The engine hummed steadily, but my heart raced with a primal fear that clawed at my insides. I had thought the back roads would provide me refuge, a way to lose the car that seemed to shadow my every move. But instead, there it was, its headlights unwavering, its presence an unsettling constant. The landscape blurred outside the window as I navigated the bends, the trees growing denser, their silhouettes resembling twisted figures in the dark. I could hardly think straight, my brain racing to make sense of the unnerving reality behind me. Was it just my imagination? Had my mind conjured the car from a simple flare of anxiety? I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, willing myself to focus. Another glance to the rearview mirror, and dread coiled tighter around my chest. The vehicle was closer now, just a ghostly silhouette, but it felt like a predator lurking behind its prey. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator, the engine growling in response, but the weight of fear held me down like a stone. I wanted to scream, to let out the panic that bubbled beneath the surface, but I swallowed it back, knowing that I had to remain calm. Panicking would only make things worse. As I approached a fork in the road, I hesitated, unsure of which path to choose. The left led to a more populated area, the right to an even darker stretch of road. With the memory of my office walls still fresh in my mind, the decision felt monumental. I chose left, the headlights illuminating the reflective road signs that promised safety in numbers. In that moment, I thought I might have outsmarted my pursuer. But as I turned, I caught a glimpse of the car behind me. It, too, took the left, its movements smooth and elusive. My heart sank back into the pit of my stomach. Was I being hunted? I fought against the rising tide of panic that threatened to drown me. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I flicked on my turn signal and took another sharp left onto a narrower street, the tires skidding slightly as I rounded the corner. I could almost hear the hum of the other car, its engine purring with calm determination. It unnerved me how it seemed to know my every intention. Ahead, the streetlights flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced along the pavement. I could see a small diner up ahead, a beacon of light in the oppressive dark. I thought of the people inside, of the warmth and safety that came with companionship. I could park, slip inside, and find solace in the presence of others. Surely, a crowded diner would deter the unknown driver behind me. I swung into the parking lot and pulled to a stop, my heart hammering in my chest. I looked back. The tinted windows of the car were still there, its engine idling like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Uncertain, I reached for the door handle, a fleeting thought urging me to flee. But before I could open the door, the car behind me moved, slowly, as though testing the waters. My breath caught in my throat. It rolled past my vehicle and came to a stop. My stomach twisted as I caught a glimpse of the driver, a figure cloaked in shadows, their face obscured. I could feel the weight of their gaze through the tinted glass. A swell of ice enveloped my spine, and I leaned back, trying to disappear into the fabric of my seat. The world outside faded into a blur as I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. What should I do? I could dart out of the car and into the diner, but what if the driver followed? I could call the police, but would they believe me? I felt trapped, caught in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. The diner's neon sign flickered above, casting a sickly glow that danced across my trembling hands. Then, as if reading my chaotic thoughts, the driver's car moved again, rolling forward slowly, deliberately. It turned, and I held my breath, expecting it to head for the exit. But instead, it stopped just beyond my view, shrouded in shadows. My heart thundered in my chest as I strained to see. I resisted the urge to lean forward, to peer out and catch a glimpse of what they were doing. What were they waiting for? Panic surged through me. My instinct screamed for me to flee, to escape the suffocating weight of dread that hung in the air. I turned the ignition key and the engine roared to life, the sound shattering the silence like glass. In a flash, I had thrown the car into reverse, my foot pressed hard against the accelerator. The tires squealed as I shot backward, not looking back until I hit the wall of the diner's parking lot. But just as I turned, desperate to escape, I saw the headlights flood back into view, illuminated by the harsh glow of the diner's sign. The driver was no longer just a figure in shadows, they were a predator, poised and ready. My heart hammered against my ribs, a fear unlike any I had known before coursing through my veins. I was being hunted. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting flickering shadows that danced along the asphalt. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I turned down another winding back road, the familiar trees blurring into a green mass. I had stayed late at the office, too late, it seemed. The whole building had been a hollow shell by the time I'd locked up. The empty parking lot felt like a scene from a horror film, every echo magnified by the stillness. Now, that unease morphed into something more sinister as the tinted windows of the car behind me loomed like a specter in my rearview mirror. I had first noticed it while driving through town. A dark shape that had appeared out of nowhere, trailing me as I made my way home. At first, I thought little of it. Perhaps it was just another late-night driver, someone returning from a long shift. But now, as I veered onto a narrow road flanked by dense woods, I felt the cold touch of dread settling over me like a damp fog. I accelerated slightly, glancing back to assess my pursuer. The headlights glared like two predatory eyes in the dark. My heart raced, pounding hard enough that I feared it might burst. I turned the radio up, trying to drown out the impending sense of doom. The upbeat music felt discordant amidst the mounting tension, as if mocking my fear. I was being hunted, and deep down, I knew it. I made a sharp turn onto a dirt road, the tires crunching over gravel. The crunching seemed to echo in the stillness of night, each sound amplified as if the woods were listening. I could feel the car behind me too close, too constant. No matter how many turns I took, how quickly I veered, it was always there, following in a relentless pursuit. My mind raced. I could call the police, but the thought of stopping my car and dialing in the dark filled me with a paralyzing fear. My instinct screamed at me to keep moving. I pressed the pedal down, pushing my small sedan to its limits. The engine groaned in protest as I navigated the winding road. Trees whipped by in a blur, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I fought not to look back, afraid that if I did, I would see something terrible, a face, a figure behind the tinted glass that would solidify my worst fears. The road forked ahead, and I took the left without a second thought, adrenaline pumping through my veins like wildfire. I needed to lose them, to break free from this invisible grip. But with every turn, the other car stayed close, as if it could anticipate my every decision. It was unnerving, more than unnerving, it was terrifying. I could feel a cold sweat prickling at my spine, and I regretted not taking the bus that evening, of not asking a coworker for a ride. As the road narrowed, trees leaned in ominously, creating a claustrophobic tunnel. I glanced at the rearview mirror again, and my breath caught in my throat. The car was closer now, its headlights illuminating the darkness between us. I felt a rush of panic. What did they want? My mind raced through scenarios. Was it a kidnapper? A vengeful lover? Or something even worse, something sinister lurking in the shadows of my life? A sudden turn to the right jolted me back to reality, and I swerved to avoid a gaping pothole. My pulse quickened even further when I heard the unmistakable sound of gravel crunching as the car mirrored my movements. I was losing grasp on my logic, and the fear turned to desperation. I took another tight turn, praying that this time would be different, that this road would take me far away. But as I glanced back once more, I realized I was wrong. The car had not lost a single inch. It was still there, a dark phantom hunting me through the trees. I fought against the rising tide of panic threatening to pull me under, focusing instead on the road ahead. I needed to regain my composure. I needed a plan. Then, I spotted it, a glimmer of hope in the form of a small diner, its neon sign flickering weakly in the gloom. It was an oasis of light in this treacherous darkness. A place filled with people, noise, safety. I pushed down hard on the accelerator, praying it was open. As I approached, I could see a few cars parked outside, a small handful of diners keeping the night alive. My heart raced. Perhaps, just perhaps, I could break away from this nightmare. As I pulled in, I could see shadows moving inside, the flicker of life. With trembling hands, I parked hastily, flinging open the door as I jumped out. I was halfway to the entrance when I dared glance back. My pulse quickened at the sight. The dark car had come to a halt just outside the diner, the engine purring softly. My breath hitched as I locked eyes with the shadows behind the tinted glass. Something inside me screamed to run, but I fought through the urge. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, the warm air wrapping around me like a comforting embrace. I forced a smile at the waitress, who raised an eyebrow at my disheveled appearance, but my eyes were drawn back to the window. The car remained, lurking in the dark, and for the first time, I felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly afraid. I ordered a coffee, trying to anchor myself in the mundane routine of life. As I waited, I glanced out again, the tension knotted tightly in my chest. The driver had not moved, but I could sense their gaze, burning through the tinted glass. The world around me blurred into the background, fading away until it was just me, the diner, and the oppressive weight of dread that had settled upon my shoulders. I wanted to scream, to cry out for help, but all I could do was sit and wait, fingers trembling near the steaming cup, praying that the nightmare would end. I had hoped the late shifts would quiet my mind, a quiet hum of paperwork against the backdrop of fluorescent lights. But as I turned the key in my car's ignition that night, the monotony of my work faded, replaced by an unsettling sense of awareness. The evening air felt thick, heavy, as though the world outside my office walls held secrets I wasn't meant to discover. I dismissed the creeping anxiety as tiredness, shaking it off as I merged onto the empty road. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting elongated shadows across the asphalt. I took a deep breath, familiarizing myself with the rhythm of the drive home, the motion almost soothing. Yet, almost immediately, a shiver traced my spine. I glanced into the rearview mirror and saw a car, black and sleek, its windows tinted so dark that I couldn't make out the figure inside. At first, I dismissed it as coincidence. Perhaps I was being paranoid after a long night. I turned right off the main road, into a series of narrow, winding back roads, hoping to shake whatever phantom was behind me. The headlights of my car sliced through the darkness, illuminating the edges of towering trees that seemed to close in around me. But the black car followed, its engine a low, constant hum that felt like a predator stalking its prey. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, the plastic biting into my palms. I took a sharp left, convinced I must have lost it, but the light from the headlights remained relentless and unyielding. It felt as if the driver knew every turn I was about to take, effortlessly mirroring my movements with an eerie precision. My heart raced as I navigated through the maze of back roads, my mind spinning with 1,000 possibilities. What did they want? I was just a woman driving home, yet the weight of unseen eyes pressed against me, suffocating and cold. I glanced at the speedometer, pushing my foot down harder on the gas. The engine roared, but the black car stayed close, as if it were tethered to me. Every twist and turn of the road felt like a descent deeper into a nightmare. The loneliness of the dark streets amplified my fears, swallowing the sounds of the world around me. I couldn't see any other cars, any other houses, just me, the road, and the shadow trailing behind. I couldn't allow myself to think too deeply, that would only intensify the dread. I took another turn, desperately hoping to find a place to lose my shadow. My stomach churned, the fear creeping up my spine. The trees closed in tighter, their branches reaching for my car like skeletal fingers. The tension mounted, every moment stretching longer than the last as I fought the urge to look back. An intersection loomed ahead, and I made a split-second decision to turn right, forcing my car onto a road that felt almost forgotten. The air shifted, the temperature dropping suddenly, and I could see my breath misting in front of me, a ghostly reminder that I was still alive and very much in danger. With each turn I took, I could feel that sinister vehicle behind me, as if it were drawing closer, feeding off my fear. I glanced in the mirror again, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw movement inside the dark car, a shadow, perhaps. The fleeting image sent a jolt of adrenaline straight through me, and I accelerated, my foot slamming down on the gas pedal, desperate to put distance between us. I took another left, the tires squealing as I struggled to maintain control. The black car was still there, its headlights like malevolent eyes glaring into the darkness. I could feel panic building, clawing at my chest, threatening to choke me. What was I supposed to do? The road twisted and turned, with no signs of civilization nearby. Suddenly, just ahead, a flicker of light caught my eye, a house. Its silhouette stood against the night sky, the faint glow of a porch light beckoning me like a lighthouse in a storm. Hope surged within me. I pressed on, my mind racing with strategies. Could I make it there before the car caught up? I could see the shape of the house coming into focus, the driveway appearing like a sanctuary. I prayed it was occupied. I swung into the driveway and hit the brakes, the car skidding to a stop. I dashed out, glancing back at the road, my heart pounding in my chest. The black car slowed down, coming to a halt just beyond the end of the driveway. I could barely breathe. My heart drummed loudly in my ears as I watched, frozen in place. The windows remained tinted, but I sensed someone inside, watching me. I tore my gaze away and sprinted toward the porch, the door looming ahead. Fumbling with the doorknob, my fingers slick with sweat, I finally managed to swing it open and stumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind me. The stale air inside the house felt suffocating. I pressed my back against the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. There was no sound, and for a moment I thought perhaps I had escaped. But then, through the silence, I heard a low, unmistakable rev of an engine outside. I edged toward the window, the chill of dread creeping back into my veins. I peeked through the curtain, my heart sinking as the black car remained parked at the end of the driveway, an ominous specter in the night. No one got out. No one moved. Just the waiting, the stillness, and the overwhelming feeling that my nightmare had only just begun. The darkness wrapped around me like a heavy shroud as I turned onto the back roads leading home. My headlights pierced the oppressive veil of night, illuminating only a few meters ahead, and that singular stretch of asphalt felt like a lifeline. The tick-tock of the dashboard clock echoed in the stillness, each second amplifying my unease. It was nearly 1 a.m, and the night had drained me of any remaining energy, but that weariness was overshadowed by the unsettling sensation that I was being watched. It began shortly after I left the office. I had noticed headlights in my rearview mirror trailing too closely, the glint of tinted windows barely discernible. My heart raced as I turned down a narrow lane, hoping the driver would pass by or lose interest. Instead, the car followed. It felt like a cruel game of cat and mouse, and I was the mouse, scurrying through the labyrinthine back roads while the cat, this unknown entity, remained steady in its pursuit. I hit the gas, the engine roaring in protest. The winding road twisted and turned, sharp bends revealing only fleeting glimpses of the landscape, dark trees looming like sentinels on either side. I could hear the gravel crunching beneath my tires, the sound almost sinister in the quiet. But the car behind me didn't falter. Its headlights stayed stubbornly fixed on my rear, unwavering and relentless. I tried to shake the feeling of dread clawing at my insides. It was just my imagination, I told myself. Late nights at the office and too many cups of coffee had warped my perception. Yet, every time I glanced in the mirror, I saw those headlights, unwavering, drawing closer with every turn I made. The driver seemed to anticipate my actions, mirroring my movements with an unsettling precision. A wave of desperation washed over me as I took another sharp corner, gravel spitting from beneath my tires. Maybe if I drove faster, I could lose them. I pressed down on the accelerator, the roar of the engine drowning out my frantic thoughts. Trees blurred past, long shadows stretching across the road, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of hope. But then I glanced in the mirror again, and my stomach sank. The car remained, close enough that I could almost make out the shape of a figure behind the wheel, hunched forward as if stalking its prey. Panic surged through me. I needed to think, to get to a place where I could breathe again. I remembered a small diner a few miles up the road that was open late. If I could just reach it, I could call for help. I rounded another corner and pushed the car harder, the engine protesting as it climbed up a steep incline. Suddenly, the headlights behind me flickered as the car accelerated. It wasn't just following anymore, it was gaining on me. My heart raced in rhythm with my thoughts, each beat a desperate plea for escape. I turned onto an even narrower road, the trees closing in, shadows painting grotesque shapes along the asphalt. The night felt suffocating, and a bone-deep chill settled over me. I pressed on, my breath quickening, desperation flooding my veins. I could feel their presence closing in, an unshakable weight pressing down on me. There was an eerie calm to the air around me, as if the world had paused to take notice of the chase. The headlights behind me glared like the eyes of a predator, relentless in their pursuit. Then, without warning, I lost my bearings. The road forked ahead, one direction leading deeper into the woods, the other descending toward the diner. I could almost hear the siren call of safety echoing in my mind, urging me to take the left. But dread twisted my insides. What if they knew I was headed there? With a racing heart, I veered left, the tires skidding over dirt and gravel. The trees tightened around me as if reaching out with gnarled fingers, the shadows morphing into nightmarish forms. I glanced back, only to find that the car had done the same, mirroring my decision with unsettling precision. It was a ghostly figure, weaving through the trees like a wraith. Sweat clung to my palms as I wrestled with my thoughts. I had to outsmart them. I needed a plan. I crept around a bend, the screech of tires cutting through the silence, and then silence fell. The headlights behind me vanished. My breath caught in my throat. Had I finally lost them? I dared to hope, slowing the car and glancing into the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness loomed behind me, stretching into the void of the night. My heart pounded, the thrumming echoing in my ears. I pressed the gas pedal again, determination mingling with dread, pushing me toward the diner and the safety it promised. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A sudden flash of headlights appeared, cutting through the trees from a direction I had never anticipated. They weren't just behind me, they had circled around, waiting for their moment. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that escape was slipping through my fingers like sand. The road ahead seemed to narrow further, a tunnel of darkness closing in. I slammed my foot on the gas, the engine roaring, but it felt like I was only prolonging the inevitable. I had no choice but to keep driving, each turn becoming more frantic, the car behind me drawing closer with every frantic heartbeat. I rounded another corner, and the diner lights finally flickered in the distance, a beacon of hope. But a sinking feeling twisted in my gut as I realized that the car would be right behind me, and by the time I reached it, I wouldn't be alone. It was only a matter of moments before the nightmare would reach its climax, and I would confront whatever dark fate awaited me. Story 5: The Echoing Shadow. I had never considered myself superstitious, but the moment I spotted the jacket slumped against the darkened corner of the train station, a shiver skittered down my spine. It was a nondescript gray, worn at the edges, with a frayed collar that hinted at long-forgotten adventures. I had just missed my train, and the station was largely empty, amplifying the unsettling silence that surrounded me. I picked it up, curious yet cautious, and held it for a moment, imagining the person who had left it behind. Perhaps they had hurried away to catch a train, or maybe they simply abandoned it, perhaps with something darker in mind. My heart raced as I wrestled with the urge to throw it back down. Instead, I shrugged it on. The fabric was surprisingly warm, as if it still held the heat of its owner. I felt a strange comfort in its embrace, but lingering unease gnawed at me. I glanced around the station, half expecting to see someone watching me from the shadows, but the only company I had were echoes of distant announcements and the rhythmic ticking of the clock. I exited the station just as the last vestiges of daylight dipped below the horizon. The evening enveloped the world in a shroud of deep indigo, and I hurried home, the jacket clutched tightly around my shoulders. I told myself I would return it the next day, but I felt an odd attachment to it, as if it had somehow become a part of me. Over the next week, I wore the jacket frequently, its weight soothing against my skin. It became a layer of security against the chill of autumn, but something else flickered beneath that initial comfort. I began to notice strange coincidences. My morning jogs took me along the paths winding through the park, where I often spotted the same individuals: an older man feeding pigeons, a woman walking two golden retrievers. But there was someone else, always on the periphery, occasionally in my line of sight, a figure in a hooded jacket, blending into the background like a ghost. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia. People come and go in the park, perhaps I just happened to cross paths with the same person multiple times. But then, my unease heightened when I stumbled upon a set of photos on my phone. I had taken a few snapshots during my runs: sunrise over the trees, the dew-soaked grass, the serene lake reflecting the amber sky. In one of the photos, the figure in the hooded jacket lurked in the background, a dark silhouette just before the trees. I squinted at the screen, heart hammering, trying to suppress the growing dread. Could it be a coincidence? I flicked through the album, and there it was again, a different angle, clearer this time, that unmistakable gray jacket with the frayed collar. I scrolled, breath hitching with every swipe. The figure appeared in 5 different photos taken across 3 days, always just far enough that I couldn't make out any details, yet close enough to be unsettling. I felt the room close in around me, shadows creeping along the walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was tracking my every move. The jacket had transformed from a comforting artifact into a sinister talisman. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that the figure was just another stranger enjoying the same park. But every time I saw the jacket draped over a chair or hanging on a hook, my skin prickled with the knowledge that someone else was connected to it. By the end of the week, I was a ball of nerves. I began to notice oddities in my daily routine. The way the cashier at the corner store seemed to take a moment longer to ring up my items, as if scrutinizing my every purchase. The fleeting glances from strangers on the subway, their eyes darting toward the jacket, and the hushed whispers I couldn't quite catch. I felt the weight of their stares like a vice around my chest. There were nights when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, convinced I could hear footsteps outside my window. I'd jump up, heart racing, peering through the curtains to find only darkness on the street below. My mind spiraled, conjuring scenarios where I was being hunted, the figure in the jacket closing in as I tried to escape. I had to know more. That Saturday, I returned to the park, determined to confront my paranoia. I took the jacket with me, hoping to shed its eerie grip. As I walked, I scanned the paths, searching for the figure. Hours passed, but I found only the mundane, a jogger, a couple holding hands, children laughing in the distance. Just as I was about to give up, I spotted him, the man in the hooded jacket, standing beneath the skeletal branches of a gnarled tree. My breath caught in my throat. He stood facing away from me, like a statue crafted from shadows. For a moment, I thought of turning back, of running in the opposite direction, but something compelled me forward. I took a step, then another, dread coursing through me as I approached. "Excuse me," I called, the phrase barely a whisper on my lips. He turned slowly, and in that instant, the world slowed. Recognition glimmered behind his eyes, a dark awareness that twisted my stomach into knots. The jacket slipped from my shoulders, pulling around my feet as the realization crashed over me. I had become more than an observer. I was part of a chilling tableau, trapped within a story that had no clear ending. The man smiled, and the unease that had plagued me for days swelled into a palpable dread. In that moment, I understood that this was no coincidence. The jacket, the figure, everything had been leading to this confrontation. The fear that had bloomed in the recesses of my mind now consumed me whole, and as I stared at the man across the park, I realized I was not just being watched, I was part of his game. The chill from the night air seeped through my window as I sat in my living room, staring at the array of photos sprawled across the coffee table. Each image was a captured moment from the past week, but there was something unsettling about them now. The same brown jacket appeared in every single one. I rubbed my temples, trying to allay the headache brewing in my forehead. This couldn't be happening. It all began at the train station, an ordinary Tuesday evening when the world felt comfortably mundane. I had spotted the jacket draped over a nearby bench while waiting for my train. It was a nondescript piece, faded and worn, but something about it tugged at my curiosity. I approached it, half expecting someone to rush back and reclaim it, but the bench remained empty, and the jacket lay forlorn, as if it were waiting for someone who would never return. After a moment's hesitation, I grabbed it and checked the pockets. Nothing but a crumpled receipt and a small, frayed piece of paper that had long lost its print. I shrugged and tossed it over my shoulder. It was chilly and I thought it would come in handy if the night got colder. Now, as I sifted through the photographs, my pulse quickened. My heart thudded in my ears at the sight of it, The jacket worn by a faceless figure, lurking in the background of a park where I had taken my son for a weekend outing, hanging off a fence at the old cemetery where I'd gone to clear my head, draped over a rail at the coffee shop where I had sat for hours, lost in thought. I felt a tightening in my chest that was almost a physical presence. Why hadn't I noticed it before? The jacket wasn't just appearing, it was tracking me. I could feel a cold sweat trickling down my spine as I recalled the moments I had thought were just mundane encounters. I had felt eyes on me in the park, felt a prickling at the back of my neck that I had brushed aside as paranoia. But now, the dots connected in a dreadfully sinister pattern. I grabbed my phone and flipped through the photos again, zooming in on the jacket each time, observing the small details that made my skin crawl. The fraying seams, the way it hung lifelessly, the almost spectral quality of the figure wearing it. Was it even a person? I couldn't tell. The images blurred at the edges, shrouded in shadow. I caught my breath, fighting the urge to scream as reality twisted into something grotesque. I needed air. With my hands shaking, I tossed the photos back on the table and stepped outside, forcing myself to breathe in the cool night air. But the clarity I had hoped for was elusive. Instead, the darkness felt heavier around me, the shadows of the trees stretching and contorting into shapes that sent my imagination spiraling. I noticed flickers of movement from the corner of my eye, but each time I turned, I found only the stillness of the neighborhood. I decided to retrace my steps, to go back to the train station, the origin of this unsettling presence. The station was less than a mile away, and I resolved to confront the scene where I had first encountered the jacket. The streetlights offered a meager glow as I made my way, my thoughts racing. Arriving at the station, I felt a sense of unease settle over me. The platform was deserted, the silence almost deafening. I paced back and forth, glancing at the bench where I had first seen the jacket. It was empty now, just a desolate piece of furniture and a sea of gray concrete, but that didn't soothe the gnawing anxiety in my gut. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, half expecting a message from my wife checking in on me. Instead, it was an alert from the photo app, suggesting new memories based on my recent uploads. I opened it, and dread washed over me. There it was again, the same brown jacket, now appearing in a picture taken from a street corner just outside my office. I stumbled back, my breath hitching. It was like the jacket had a life of its own, weaving in and out of my existence, and snaring me in some grotesque game. It was impossible, but I couldn't deny what I'd seen. Suddenly, a noise broke the stillness, a soft shuffle, the kind that raised a hair on the back of my neck. I turned quickly, adrenaline surging through my veins as I searched the shadows. "Hello?" My voice echoed into the darkness. There was no response, just the wind whispering through the trees. I cursed under my breath, feeling foolish for calling out. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air thickened, pressing down on me as I scanned the area. Then, I saw it. A figure stood at the far end of the platform, partially obscured in darkness. My chest tightened, instinctively pushing me to retreat. I squinted and, under the flickering light of the lamp, I could just make out the jacket. It looked identical to the one I had found. Could it be the same one? My heart raced as the figure remained still, seemingly aware of my presence but refusing to make a move. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound strong. But the figure showed no sign of recognition. With every second that passed, the fear morphed into a paralyzing dread. I turned on my heel and fled, racing back through the dark streets, the echo of my footsteps mingling with the sound of my panicked breathing. I didn't stop until I was inside my house, the door latched securely behind me. I pressed my back against the door, trying to calm my racing heart. I needed to think rationally, but the implications of the jacket haunted me. It felt like a noose tightening around my throat. Fingers trembling, I grabbed my phone and opened the photos again, poring over them, desperately searching for an answer, a clue, anything that could make sense of this madness. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. Whatever game was being played, I was losing. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance. I was the prey, and whatever stalked me was inching closer. The jacket haunted me. I knew it was ridiculous, but its presence lingered in my mind, festering like an open wound. I tried to shake it off, convince myself it was nothing more than a lost item, a mundane artifact in the bustling life of the city. Yet, the moment I returned home from the station, I couldn't escape the feeling that it had sought me out. I pulled up the photos from the past week on my phone, the images documenting my routine as a lonely graphic designer. I had taken snapshots of my morning coffee, the skyline during sunset, and the cats that roamed the neighborhood. I scrolled through them leisurely, trying to distract myself from the nagging sensation that something was amiss. That was when I stopped dead in my tracks. In the background of my first photo, the jacket flickered like an apparition. My heart raced as I zoomed in, the worn fabric unmistakable against the blurring backdrop of the cafe. My hands trembled. The jacket seemed to loom, a ghostly figure observing my every move. I quickly scanned the rest of the images, and there it was again, this time in the park, a shadowy figure stalking the edge of the frame, the hood pulled low, obscuring any sign of a face. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my phone. The air around me thickened, suffocating me in a cocoon of dread. This was no coincidence. I had been followed. But why? Who could possibly want to track my every step? The unsettling thoughts spiraled through my mind with increasing intensity. I could hear the faint echo of laughter from the street below, people going about their mundane lives, completely unaware of the darkness that had begun to envelop me. I had to do something. Panic clawed at my insides as I retrieved my jacket from the chair. Before I slipped it on, I scanned my apartment, my heart pounding against my ribs. I thought of the front door, the locked windows, the frayed curtains that fluttered with each gust of the wind. I wanted to feel secure. I had lived here for 5 years without confrontation, and now it all felt like a hoax, a fragile illusion that could shatter at any moment. With a deep breath, I decided to head to the train station again. I needed to confront this haunting presence. Retracing my steps would either bring clarity or plunge me further into madness. The streets buzzed with life as I made my way, neon lights flashing unanswered questions into the night. As I approached the station, a dull ache formed in my stomach. My breath quickened. I stepped inside, and the familiar scent of damp concrete and stale air wrapped around me like a shroud. I darted through the terminal, looking for any sign of the jacket. It was absurd, yet I felt a magnetic pull toward the spot where I had found it. I arrived at the bench where I first laid eyes on the dark fabric, the memory still sharp in my mind. I scanned the area, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The station felt oppressive, the shadows stretching as the fluorescent lights flickered overhead. I leaned against the cool metal of the bench, and for a moment, I thought I could hear whispers, hushed voices melding with the train announcements echoing through the terminal. Then, my eyes caught a glimpse, a figure on the edge of the platform, partially obscured by the crowd, but unmistakably wearing the jacket. My stomach dropped. I couldn't see the person's face, but instinct screamed at me to run. I took a step back, the panic urging me to get out of the station, but my feet felt glued to the linoleum floor. Suddenly, the figure turned. I felt the weight of their gaze on me, a cold shiver racing down my spine. It was as if time slowed, people brushed past, oblivious to the silent exchange. My mind raced as I fumbled for my phone, but in that moment, I couldn't take my eyes off them. The individual was just a silhouette, but as the crowd shifted, I glimpsed a flash of pale skin beneath the hood, a face barely illuminated in the dim light. There was something eerily familiar in their posture, a shadow of recognition that sent bile rising in my throat. I jerked away, sprinting toward the exit. My heart hammered louder than the rapid footsteps on the tiled floor. The station doors swung open, spilling me into the chilly night air. I ran blindly, hearing nothing but my own ragged breaths. Once I reached my apartment, I slammed the door behind me, locking it with trembling hands. I leaned against it, panting, staring into the shadows of my dimly lit living room. The jacket was still a specter lingering in my mind, festering like a disease. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know who was tracking me, who had buried themselves into the periphery of my life. As I sank onto the couch, my eyes fell on the pile of photos on the table. I couldn't help but feel the weight of each image pressing down on me, taunting me with their very existence. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through the images again in a frantic search for more details, anything that might give me a clue. In one picture, taken at the coffee shop, the jacket curled up against the wall like a predator lurking in the shadows. In another, the edge of it was caught in the park, where I had shared a laugh with a friend. Each moment, seemingly innocent, was tainted with the realization that I was being watched. A thought flickered through my mind, a fleeting, creeping tendril of paranoia. What if the jacket wasn't just a coincidence but a message? I could feel it now, the weight of the unknown pressing down heavily, urging me to delve deeper into the rabbit hole I had unwittingly fallen into. Each photo, each memory, began to twist and warp, an unsettling reflection of a world I no longer understood. I was a ghost haunting my own life, the jacket a reminder that I was never truly alone. As the night drew on, I could feel the shadows closing in, whispering the unspeakable truth I had tried to ignore. I wasn't just being followed, I was being hunted. I barely slept that night. My dreams were a twisted echo of the past week, replaying the blurry edges of reality with a surreal twist. Each time I closed my eyes, the image of that ominous jacket lingered in my mind, a ghostly specter bound to my every move. The worn fabric, a deep navy blue with frayed cuffs, now seemed omnipresent, a silent predator lurking in the shadows of my life. The following morning, I decided to leave my apartment. The walls felt constraining, as if they were inching closer, suffocating me in my own skin. I needed air, a semblance of normalcy. I grabbed my camera instinctively, hoping to distract myself with the routine of capturing everyday moments. I was a photographer by passion, and it had always provided me solace. I wandered to the nearby park, the sun peeking through the drab clouds, casting flickers of light on the grass. Each click of the shutter offered a brief escape from the gnawing paranoia. I focused on the children playing, the elderly couples feeding pigeons, the squirrels darting between branches. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was absurd, I knew, but the air around me buzzed with an unsettling tension. After an hour, I felt a mix of relief and unease. The lens of my camera caught moments of joy, yet I couldn't shake the dread that enveloped me like a shroud. I returned home, my hands trembling slightly as I uploaded the images onto my computer. The familiar excitement of reviewing my work was overshadowed by an unshakable dread. As the photos flickered across the screen, I felt an icy grip on my art. In one image, a candid shot of two children laughing as they chased each other. There it was. The jacket. It hung in the background, draped over a park bench, unnoticed at the time. My breath quickened, and I leaned closer to the screen, examining it intently. The same frayed cuffs, the same deep navy hue. I could hardly convince myself it was a coincidence anymore. I scrolled through the rest of the day's images, and there it was again, a glimpse of the jacket in a distant frame, partially obscured behind a tree. A cold sweat trickled down my back. Each photo I took that week bore evidence of the jacket's unyielding presence. I flipped through the images, my heart pounding with every new discovery, like a countdown to dread. I could no longer rationalize my growing paranoia. I had indeed been followed. The jacket was more than an article of clothing. It was a harbinger of something sinister, tethered to me through time and space. The realization gripped me with a primal fear. Who wore it? Why did they stalk me with such precision? In a fit of frustration, I slammed my laptop shut. I needed clarity, a break from this spiraling anxiety. Perhaps a walk to the train station would clear my mind. It was a place I had been before, a nexus of faces and stories where I could lose myself amidst a crowd. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. The world outside felt stark and bright, but each step stirred my anxiety, the rhythm of my heartbeat punctuating the silence around me. As I approached the station, the hubbub of commuters filled the air. I meandered through the throng, my eyes scanning the crowd for any hint of familiarity, any flash of fabric that might send me spiraling into paranoia. I reached the platform and leaned against a metal railing, peering down the tracks. The sound of trains thrumming in the distance soothed me slightly, grounding me in the moment. But my reprieve was short-lived. I felt it again, the sensation of being watched. I turned, scanning the faces around me, but they were all lost in their worlds, their lives far removed from mine. Then, I saw her. A woman stood a few feet away, her coat a striking crimson against the drab grays and browns of the station. She was staring at me. My breath caught, and my heart raced. I had never seen her before, yet something about her gaze felt unsettlingly familiar. It was as if she recognized me, or perhaps she was the one who had been tracking me. I instinctively took a step back, my fingers trembling against the cold steel of the railing. My thoughts spiraled. Was she the one who owned the jacket? My skin crawled at the notion. I snatched my camera from my bag, hoping to capture her, an image that might clarify this unfolding nightmare. As I raised the lens, she smiled. I faltered, the camera shaking in my grip. It was not a smile of kindness or curiosity, it was knowing. It sent a chill racing through my veins. I lowered the camera, feeling a pit open within my stomach. I had to leave. This wasn't merely a coincidence, it felt like a noose tightening around my neck. I turned abruptly and fled, pushing through the crowd, my heart pounding louder than the trains. I could feel her presence behind me, an invisible thread weaving through the throng, pulling me further into a web of dread. I didn't dare look back, fearing that if I did, I would find her right there, just a heartbeat away, the jacket draped over her arm like a trophy. As I burst out of the station and into the street, I felt the suffocating weight of paranoia closing in. I had to find a way to escape this cycle, to sever the connection that bound me to the haunting jacket and its unseen owner. But every step I took felt like another step deeper into the abyss, the shadows whispering secrets I was no longer sure I wanted to hear. The train station loomed behind me, an unwelcoming hulk of concrete and steel. I had long since lost count of the days I had spent here, searching for some semblance of normalcy, but the more I searched, the more I found myself spiraling. I turned the collar of the jacket up against the evening chill. Its fabric was coarse and worn, almost comforting in its familiarity, but I couldn't shake the sense that it was just a facade for something sinister. The day before, I had decided to sift through my phone's gallery, hoping to distract myself from the gnawing feeling of being watched. Each swipe through the images turned my stomach. There it was, that same jacket. In the background of photos I had taken at the coffee shop, at the park, even at the grocery store. A flash of dark fabric, the unmistakable silhouette of a hood, lurking behind passerby or sitting on the bench where I had rested. I could hardly breathe as I stared at the images, the realization crashing over me in waves. Someone had been following me. I glanced around the station, my heart racing. The thrumming of the trains seemed to synchronize with my pulse. I shifted my gaze, searching for anyone who might carry the weight of those eyes I could feel on my neck. A couple of teenagers loitered near the vending machines, oblivious to my distress. No one else stood out as particularly suspicious, yet the chilling realization of being hunted gnawed at my mind like a rat in the dark. I turned away from the station's bustle and stepped outside. The night air was brisk, but it did little to clear the fog of dread that clung to me. I wrapped my arms tightly around the jacket, feeling the fabric brush my skin, my own strange talisman of unease. It had become a fixture in my life, both as a reminder of the mystery and a tether to the haunting paranoia that had woven itself into my thoughts. Days merged into one another. I tracked my movements like a detective piecing together a crime scene. Each day began with an effort to shake off the weight of the coat, and each evening, I found myself questioning the supposed coincidence. Was it a coincidence? Or was it something more sinister? I couldn't shake the sensation that the jacket might not have been simply abandoned. It felt like a marker, a thread that led back to me. As the evening deepened, I found myself wandering through the dimly lit side streets that threaded away from the station. Shadows danced across the cracked pavement while the faint echo of distant trains acted as a metronome for my racing thoughts. I stopped at the corner of Maple Street, a place where I had taken a photo just a few days earlier. I fished out my phone, my mouth drying at the thought of what I might see. I flipped through the gallery, each swipe igniting a new wave of dread with every image. There it was, a flicker of movement in the corner of the frame. It was hard to discern, but the shape was unmistakable. The jacket hung there, just behind a lamppost, as if it had been waiting for me to pass by. My stomach twisted. How had I missed it at the time? Had the figure been there, lurking, as I snapped the picture? I paced in a tight circle, torn between the urge to flee and the need to confront this unseen stalker. But without a face, without a name, I was left with only the shadows twisting at the edges of my mind. The weight of paranoia gripped me, squeezing tighter with every heartbeat. My gut told me to go home, to lock the doors and barricade myself away from whatever nightmare was brewing, but my feet carried me further down the street. I couldn't let this go. I had no idea who was doing this, but I needed answers. I had to find the owner of the jacket, to unearth the truth behind this relentless chase. As I neared the old railway trestle, the chill in the air thickened. The moon cast long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets as I approached the narrow passageway beneath the tracks. It was the kind of place where secrets festered, hidden from prying eyes, and I could almost hear their laughter echoing back at me. The trestle had seen better days, its paint chipped and peeling, but I pressed onward, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. I took a deep breath and stepped beneath the trestle. The darkness enveloped me, swallowing the faint light from the street lamps above. My heart hammered in my chest. I pulled out my phone, turning on the flashlight feature, illuminating the ground before me. The beam flickered against the damp stones, and I felt a chill race down my spine. Then I saw it, a flash of dark fabric flitting into the periphery of my light. I turned, heart racing, but the figure was gone. I caught only a glimpse, but the unmistakable shape of the jacket flickered away like a memory. I cursed under my breath, frustration boiling over. "Show yourself!" I shouted into the emptiness, my voice echoing back to me in mocking laughter. Silence answered my call. I felt like a marionette with its strings cut, untethered from reality. I took a step back, the weight of the jacket heavy in my grasp. I stumbled in the darkness, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. I was spiraling into madness, consumed by a fear that refused to loosen its grip. Just as I turned to leave, a soft rustle caught my ear. I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The darkness around me seemed to shift, and then I saw them, two glinting eyes peering out from the gloom, reflecting the light of my phone like twin beacons of malice. My breath hitched in my throat as I felt the world tilt under the weight of that gaze. Story 6, Eyes Beneath the Surface. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth as I set up camp at the edge of Lake Hollow with Emma. I had wanted a weekend escape from the chaos of our lives, a chance for intimacy away from the hum of the city. Little did I know that the serenity of that secluded lake would soon be marred by an unfamiliar fear. We arrived just after noon, the sun bright and inviting. The water sparkled like shards of glass, reflecting the clear blue sky. Emma beamed as she unpacked the tent, her laughter mingling with the gentle lapping of the waves. Unburdened by the weight of our everyday worries, we fell into an easy rhythm, the air filled with our shared jokes and dreams. For a moment, everything felt perfect. After we had set up our camp, we decided to take a short hike around the lake. The trail was narrow and winding, surrounded by dense thickets of bushes and towering trees. As we walked, we spoke about life and where we saw ourselves in the future. Emma's voice was sweet, a melody that echoed through the stillness of the forest. But then, just as we were about to turn back, I noticed something odd on the ground. Footprints, fresh and unmistakable, led away from our campsite, disappearing into the underbrush. They were bare, the toes splayed out, and they seemed to have been made recently. Emma noticed my hesitation and turned to me, her brow furrowed in concern. I shrugged it off, attributing my unease to the vividness of the prints. Probably just some kids messing around, I said, forcing a smile. But deep inside, a knot of dread twisted tighter. When we returned to our campsite, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the ground. Our laughter faded as the shadows deepened, and an unsettling sensation crept over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone, that someone or something was watching us from the thick foliage. At dusk, we built a fire, its crackling light flickering around us like a protective barrier. We roasted marshmallows and talked about everything and nothing, attempting to drown out the unease that had settled over me. Yet, with each snap of a twig, my heart raced. I found myself glancing into the trees, half expecting to see a figure lurking just beyond the light. As night descended, the forest transformed. The warmth of the fire could do little to dispel the chill that settled in my bones. The previously inviting lake now appeared foreboding under the cover of darkness, a vast expanse of black water that mirrored the night sky. The stars twinkled like distant, indifferent eyes, and the moon hung low, casting a pale glow over everything. We tried to sleep in our tent, huddled together beneath a well-worn sleeping bag. Emma nestled against me, her breath warm against my neck, but sleep eluded me. I lay wide awake, listening to the sounds of the night. The rustling of leaves, distant hoots of owls, and the occasional splashes from the lake seemed amplified, filling the air with an unsettling atmosphere. Then I heard a faint noise coming from outside the tent. A rustling, as though something was moving just beyond the fabric, too close for comfort. I held my breath, waiting for another sound, my mind racing with each possibility. I turned to Emma, but she was fast asleep, blissfully unaware of the tension that gripped me. I slowly unzipped the tent, the sound echoing loudly in the stillness. I peeked out, my heart pounding in my chest. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting flickering shadows. The trees loomed ominously, their branches swaying gently in the cool breeze, but there was nothing there. Just darkness, a thick, suffocating darkness. I stepped out, the ground cold beneath my bare feet. The lake was still, its surface mirror-like, but I felt the weight of eyes upon me, as if the very trees were alive, watching my every move. I hesitated, torn between the desire to explore and an instinct to retreat back into the safety of the tent. Just as I was about to return, I caught sight of something in the distance, more footprints, leading from the edge of the lake towards the trees. My stomach dropped, a chill creeping up my spine. These were not the same prints I had seen earlier. They were deeper, more defined, as if someone had been pacing back and forth by the water's edge. I called out, my voice trembling, "Emma?" No response. I took a step toward the water, straining my ears for any sign of movement. I felt exposed, like prey to an unseen predator. The rustling resumed, closer now. I was not alone. and the knowledge chilled me to the core. Suddenly, a twig snapped. My breath caught in my throat. I turned quickly, feeling the pounding of my heart in my ears. Something was out there, hidden in the darkness. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it watching me, waiting, as if it knew I was vulnerable. I stumbled back toward the tent, panic surging through my veins. As I reached for the zipper, I heard a whisper on the wind, a soft, eerie sound that sent shivers down my spine. The sensation of being followed intensified, every instinct screaming at me to get inside, to hide. I zipped the tent shut behind me and turned to Emma, shaking her gently. "Emma, wake up." "I think there's someone out there," I whispered, my voice barely audible. She stirred, blinking in confusion. "What? What are you talking about?" Before I could respond, a rumble of noise erupted outside, branches snapping and leaves rustling. I held my breath, heart racing, as the shadows beyond the tent swayed and shifted. Whatever was out there knew we were alone, and it felt closer than ever before. The sun dipped behind the jagged mountains, casting long shadows that crept across the campsite. I glanced at Jessica, her brow furrowed as she stirred the campfire, the flickering flames dancing in her eyes. We had set up our tent near the water's edge. The serene lake stretched before us, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting the fiery hues of dusk. A perfect escape from the chaos of our lives until the echoes of the day's discovery returned to haunt me. Jessica reached for the marshmallows, but her hand trembled. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I straightened, straining to listen. The evenings in the woods were alive with sounds, but something sounded different. The rustling in the dense thicket, not far from where the tree line met the clearing, was too deliberate, too calculated, as if whatever made it was moving with purpose. I turned to face the darkness, trying to shake off the chill creeping up my spine. "Probably just a raccoon," I said, forcing a laugh I didn't truly feel. "They love campsites." Jessica nodded, but her eyes betrayed her worry. I didn't want to admit that I had spotted those footprints earlier, leading away from our campsite, disappearing into the underbrush. They were larger than any animal tracks I recognized, almost human-like in their shape, and they had unsettled me more than I ever wanted to reveal. With the sun's retreat, the air grew cooler, and I could feel the weight of the surrounding woods pressing in. I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself, but the smell of damp earth and pine needles felt overwhelming. My heart thudded in my chest like a war drum. "Let's eat," I suggested, trying to distract us from the growing tension. I grabbed the skewers and started prepping the marshmallows, aiming for normalcy amidst the creeping dread. As we roasted our treats over the flames, the sounds of the forest seemed to grow softer, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. A sudden rustle startled me, and I dropped the skewer, the marshmallow landing in the dirt with a soft thud. I looked over at Jessica, whose eyes were wide, staring into the shadows beyond the firelight. "What was that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, unable to keep the unease from my tone. I rose, scanning the tree line once more, half expecting to see someone staring back at us. My mind raced through the possibilities. Was someone else out there, or was it just our overactive imaginations fueled by isolation? "We should go check it out," I suggested, despite the uneasiness knotting in my stomach. I didn't want to sound like a coward, especially not to Jessica. "It's probably just a deer or something." "No, let's stay here," she pleaded, clutching her arms around herself. "I don't like this. I feel like we're being watched." Her words sent another shiver down my spine. I returned to the fire, trying to smile reassuringly, but the flickering flames couldn't mask the truth of her statement. The sensation of being observed had settled deep in my bones, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The night deepened around us, the sky a canvas of twinkling stars, but the beauty did little to ease my tension. I glanced back at the lake, its calm surface now transformed into a dark mirror reflecting the trees surrounding it. And for the briefest moment, I thought I saw a figure lurking at the water's edge, but when I blinked, it vanished. Just a trick of the light, I told myself. The fire crackled, but its warmth was hollow against the chill seeping into the clearing. Jessica's fingers drummed nervously against the log she sat on. I needed to keep her calm, needed to dismiss the growing dread that threatened to spiral into panic. "Why don't we tell ghost stories?" I proposed, trying to lighten the mood. "You know, something fun?" Jessica forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Okay, but you go first." I racked my brain for a story, something spooky yet silly, like the ones we told around campfires back in our college days. But the weight of the forest felt heavier now, and I couldn't shake the sense that there was something lurking beyond the firelight. I began to weave a tale of an old ghost haunting a cabin, but halfway through, a rustling sound shattered the narrative, pulling us both back to our reality. We exchanged glances, and my heart raced. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, barely above a hush. This time, the noise came closer, a soft crunch of leaves underfoot, and I felt an irrational surge of fear. "Stay here," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. I grabbed the flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. "Where are you going?" Jessica's voice wavered. "I'll just take a look." "I won't be long." I stepped away from the fire, every fiber of my being screaming at me to turn back. As I approached the tree line, the rustling stopped. The sudden stillness was deafening, and I felt as if the woods were watching me, holding their breath in anticipation. I shone the light into the trees, the beam revealing nothing but a wall of shadows. I felt stupid for separating myself from Jessica, but I needed to know. I took another step forward, straining to listen. The air was thick with tension, the scent of damp earth and pine filling my nostrils. Then, in the periphery of my vision, I caught a flicker of movement, a shadow darting away, just beyond the faint halo of my flashlight. My pulse quickened. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking. There was no response, only the whisper of the wind through the trees. I turned back, the desire to return to the safety of the fire overpowering. But as I did, that feeling of being watched washed over me anew. Panic surged, and I stumbled back toward the campsite, my heart pounding like a trapped animal. When I reached the clearing, Jessica was standing, her expression pale. "You were gone too long," she said, her voice edged with urgency. "I heard something." "Me too." I hesitated, unsure of how to voice the lingering fear that coiled in my gut. "I think there's someone else here." The night loomed heavy around us, the fire flickering erratically, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to dance with a life of their own. As I looked into the forest again, the oppressive darkness felt like a cage, and I knew, deep down, we were not alone. The sun dipped behind the treetops, casting long shadows across the campsite. A chill settled in the air, whispering through the leaves, and I shivered involuntarily. I glanced at Sarah, her brow furrowed as she fiddled with the campfire. We had enjoyed a few hours of peace, but the strange occurrences from earlier in the day hung over us like a dark cloud. It started with the footprints. They were unmistakable, leading away from the edge of our clearing into the dense foliage surrounding the lake. I had thought little of it at first, assuming they belonged to a curious hiker or perhaps a local animal. But Sarah had sensed something different. She had refused to let me brush it off as insignificant. "People don't just wander out here," she had said, her voice tense. "This area is way off the beaten path." Now, as the sun's final rays faded, I regretted my decision to stay. The thickening dusk smeared the sky with hues of purple and gray, but beyond that beauty lurked an unsettling unease. I stirred the fire, the flames crackling to life and casting flickering shadows across our tent. A small comfort, I thought, but the space felt far too open, far too exposed. A rustle echoed from the trees, and I froze, my heart racing. Sarah looked up, her eyes wide, reflecting the firelight. I suppressed the urge to reassure her, to say it was just the wind, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The noise had a weight to it, a purpose. It wasn't just the wind. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded slowly, unwilling to break the fragile calm we had managed to create around the fire. The rustling persisted, coming closer, then retreating back into the shadows of the trees. Each time it returned, it felt more deliberate, as if something or someone was testing the boundaries of our campsite. "Maybe we should check it out," I suggested, forcing bravado into my tone. "If it's a person, and they don't intend to be friendly, I'd rather not confront them," she replied sharply. The fire crackled, and I felt its warmth seep into my skin, momentarily blocking out the chill creeping in from the darkening woods. But responsibility pushed me to my feet. "I'll just take a quick look around." "You stay here." "No, I'll come with you." Before I could protest, Sarah had stood and grabbed a flashlight from her gear. I couldn't help but admire her courage. Together we moved toward the tree line, the beam of light cutting a narrow path through the encroaching darkness. The air felt thicker as we stepped away from the comfort of the fire, every sound amplified in the stillness. "Look," she pointed, her voice barely a whisper. In the dirt, the footprints were more visible now, their distinct shapes clear against the leaf-littered ground. They faded into the underbrush, deeper than I had thought. I traced their path with my eyes, the sensation of being watched returning tenfold. My instinct screamed at me to retreat, but I forced myself to look closer. "Should we follow them?" Sarah asked, hesitation in her voice. I hated to admit it, but the answer was no. We should head back to the fire, make sure our stuff is locked up. As we turned to go, something shifted in the shadows, a brief movement too quick for my eyes to catch. I gripped Sarah's arm tighter and felt her tense beside me. "What was that?" she asked, her voice just above a whisper. I took a deep breath, shaking my head, trying to dismiss the rush of fear. I had to keep it together. "Probably just a deer," I replied, though a part of me knew it was a lie. We reached the fire, the warmth and light momentarily grounding us. I attempted to shake off the dread creeping into my thoughts. We sat in silence, the only sound the crackling of the campfire and an occasional rustle in the trees. As the darkness deepened, it felt as if the woods had come alive, pressing in around us. "Do you think anyone else is out here?" Sarah asked, breaking the stillness. "No," I said, but even I could hear the cracks in my voice. The rustling became more persistent, and I could no longer deny it. Someone was out there, prowling through the woods, watching us. I felt it in my bones. A primal instinct to flee surged through me, but I remained frozen, drawn into the horror of the unknown. "Stay close," I said, my voice low and steady, as if I could lull away the panic that threatened to consume us. The night deepened, the fire a feeble barrier against the encroaching darkness. I recalled the unease in Sarah's eyes earlier, the fear of being watched, of being hunted. I glanced at her, and she returned my gaze, her eyes reflecting the fire, but filled with a growing dread. Time passed, and the rustling slowed, but it did not disappear. It remained, lurking just beyond our sight, a cruel reminder that we were not alone. The chill in the air seemed more pronounced, a heavy blanket that pressed down upon us. We sat in that unease, each of us lost in our thoughts, the air thick with unspoken fears. Finally, as the fire dimmed and the shadows loomed closer, I knew we could not ignore what was happening any longer. Whatever was out there, it had a purpose. It wanted us to know we were not safe. As the last embers of the fire glowed, I felt the instinct to flee, to run far away from this cursed place. But I was trapped, both by my mind's terror and the gnawing worry of what waited in the darkness, watching us, waiting for us to make a move. The air was thick with a tangible silence as twilight settled over the lake. Shadows stretched long, creeping over the water's glassy surface, turning it into a dark mirror that reflected not the sky, but an encroaching sense of dread. I felt the weight of unease pressing down on my chest as I sat by the embers of the dying fire, the last flickers of warmth battling the encroaching chill of the night. Earlier that day, Sam and I had reveled in the serenity of our secluded spot. We hiked around the lake, the sunlight dappling the path with playful shadows. But that joy had morphed into an uncomfortable tension when I noticed the footprints. They were distinct, deep impressions in the soft earth, leading away from our campsite. Sam had brushed it off, laughing as he claimed they were likely animal tracks, but I knew better. The prints were too large, too human in shape, and they turned abruptly, disappearing into the thicket. "Are you sure you locked the car?" I asked, trying to mask my rising panic. "Of course I did," Sam replied, his voice light, though I could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Probably just some other campers." I wanted to believe him, but the thought of another presence lurking nearby gnawed at the edges of my mind. As darkness blanketed the area, the sounds of the woods changed. The rustling leaves carried with them an unsettling whisper, like secrets shared just out of earshot. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone emerge from the trees. "It's just the wind," Sam reassured me, pulling me closer as he tossed another log onto the fire. The flames roared momentarily, illuminating his face. In that brief light, I saw a shadow flicker in the tree line, a silhouette too deliberate to be the result of the fire. My heart raced. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "See what?" he replied, his brow furrowed. He turned to scan the perimeter of our campsite. "It's just the shadows, babe." "Maybe," I murmured, though I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. I could feel the chill of being watched. It gnawed at my skin, a cold finger tracing down my spine. The wind picked up, carrying with it a distant sound, a low, dragging noise that sent chills through me. I clutched my knees to my chest, trying to ignore the way my heart thrummed like a drum against my ribs. "I'll check it out," Sam said, suddenly standing. "Just stay here." "Wait," I reached for him, desperation rising in my voice. "You can't go out there alone." He hesitated, glancing back at me with a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll be fine. Just, if you hear anything weird, call out, okay?" My heart sank as he stepped away from the light of the fire, moving toward the trees. The firelight painted his figure in flickering shades, elongating his shadow until it was almost monstrous. I sat there, the space stretching out unnaturally around us, feeling the darkness swallow him inch by inch. The rustling intensified, shifting from the trees to nearer brush, the sound moving as though something purposeful was approaching. "Sam," I called, my voice quaking. There was no response. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the screen's light flickering against the darkness. The battery was low, the signal non-existent. Panic tightened my throat. I stood up, my breath hitching as I strained to listen. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving closer to the edge of the trees. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I stood frozen, caught between fear and the desire to call out to Sam. "Sam!" I shouted again, louder this time, desperation clawing at my throat. The footsteps stopped. Silence enveloped the woods, too deep, too heavy. I could feel the air quivering, pregnant with something dark. I turned to the fire, and its glow seemed weaker now, the flames flickering with uncertainty. "Sam!" I yelled again. I took a cautious step toward the tree line, my heart pounding in my ears. The rustling had resumed, now a low growl of movement, indistinguishable, lurking just beyond the reach of the firelight. Suddenly, a figure materialized from the shadows, stumbling into the clearing. It was Sam. His face was pale, eyes wide and frantic. "Get back," he shouted, panic lacing his voice. Before I could react, he crashed toward me, grabbing my arm and pulling me back. "We need to go. Now." "What happened?" I gasped, bewildered, but he didn't answer. He dragged me away from the fire, the warmth of its glow receding as we moved toward the trees. The sounds of the forest wrapped around us, whispering hidden truths that chilled my bones. I glanced back at the campsite, the fire flickering as if it knew something we didn't. "Please, just trust me," he urged, his grip fierce. I didn't argue. My instinct screamed at me to flee, and as we plunged into the underbrush, I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting for the cover of darkness to claim us entirely. Panic surged through me as realization dawned. Whatever had been tracking us was still out there, lurking just beyond the trees, the watcher of the lake. I could almost feel its breath on my neck. As we scrambled deeper into the woods, the night closed in around us, suffocating and filled with dread. I could sense it now more than ever, the unsettling knowledge that we were not just camping, we were prey, and in this terrifying game of hide and seek, we were losing. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and indigo. The serene beauty of the evening was in stark contrast to the tension that had settled over us since the discoveries of the day. I stubbornly tried to cling to the warmth of the fading light, convinced that it would shield us from what lurked in the shadows. But as the darkness enveloped the campsite, all I could feel was unease coiling within me like a serpent. "I'll start the fire," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. The flickering flames always brought a sense of comfort, a barrier against the creeping fear that had infiltrated our thoughts. I gathered dry twigs and logs, the aroma of pine mingling with the damp earth as I worked, trying to keep my mind busy. Lila stood nearby, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, the tension in her posture betraying the calm facade she attempted to maintain. She had been quieter since we spotted the footprints, the realization that we weren't alone gnawing at her like a relentless predator. I glanced at her, hoping to share a reassuring smile, but she was staring at the trees, eyes wide and distant. "Did you hear that?" she asked suddenly, breaking the thick silence that had begun to settle around us. I focused, straining to pick up any sound that might have escaped me, but all that I could hear was the soft crackle of the kindling as I placed it onto the small mound. "It's just the wind," I replied, though my voice lacked conviction. The trees swayed gently, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms. Lila shook her head, her dark hair falling across her face. "No, it sounded like footsteps." I hesitated, the image of the footprints etched in my mind. The snow-dusted ground had shown signs of another presence, a presence that had left those prints leading away from our campsite. The idea of someone else prowling nearby brought a chill that seeped deeper than the autumn air. "Maybe it was just an animal," I suggested, forcing a lightness into my tone that I didn't feel. But the look on her face told me she didn't buy it. "It didn't sound like an animal," she insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. It was deliberate. I tried to ignore the creeping dread, focusing instead on the fire. After a few moments of struggle, I managed to ignite the dry twigs, and soon we were encircled by the warm glow of the flames. We settled onto our camp chairs, the flickering light creating a veil between us and the woods beyond. "What if there's someone out there?" Lila spoke again, her voice barely carrying above the crackling fire. "What if they're watching us?" I opened my mouth to dispel her fears, but the words wouldn't come. The thought lingered, a shadow cast by the firelight. Just as I had begun to feel a semblance of security, I heard the rustling of leaves, a sound distinct from the gentle wind. It was quick, sudden, and too deliberate to be the wind or a forest creature. My heart raced. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice low and strained. Yeah. Lila's eyes met mine, and I could see the spark of fear reflected in her pupils, dark as the night around us. Another rustle came, this time closer. A branch snapped, echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. I turned towards the sound, squinting into the darkness, but saw nothing but the wavering shadows cast by our fire. Let's go check it out, I suggested, though my body hesitated, frozen by instinct. No, she said firmly, shaking her head. We should stay here. The fire popped and hissed, the flames licking upward as if they were trying to escape the encroaching darkness. I knew she was right, but the urge to confront whatever was out there stirred within me. What if it's just someone lost? I asked, half-heartedly trying to convince both of us. Lila was silent, her eyes darting around the perimeter of our camp, searching for shapes in the blackness. What if it's the person who made those footprints? She murmured, her voice trembling. The realization settled over me like a damp blanket. Whoever had left those prints was still nearby, and they could be watching us right now. I strained my ears, listening intently for any further sounds, but it grew quiet again, oppressively so. The shadows seemed to thicken, creeping closer as the firelight struggled against the darkness. I felt a rush of adrenaline course through me. We need to stay alert. Let's keep the fire going and make noise, so whatever it is knows we're not afraid, I proposed, desperate for action, for control. Okay, Lila agreed reluctantly, still scanning the woods. We began to talk, our voices rising above the crackling fire, but my mind was elsewhere. Each crack of a branch or rustle of leaves sent icy fingers of dread down my spine. The air felt charged with an unseen presence, one I couldn't shake. With every laugh and attempt at light conversation, an unsettling feeling settled over me. It was an awareness that we were being watched, a feeling I couldn't articulate. And then I noticed it, movement among the trees. Just for a heartbeat, something shifted just beyond the edge of the light. Lila, I whispered, my heart pounding. Look. She turned, her eyes widening as she followed my gaze. What is that? I squinted into the darkness. The movement had stopped, leaving only the rustle of leaves in the wind. I don't know, I stammered, dread pooling in my stomach. We both held our breath, the night closing around us. And then, from the depths of the shadows came a fleeting whisper that danced through the trees, taunting us. You're not alone. The fire flared, casting a sudden burst of light that illuminated the woods for an instant. In that brief moment, I thought I saw a figure standing among the trees, a glimpse of something that sent a shiver down my spine. Then it was gone, vanished into the depths of the forest, leaving behind only the echo of our fearful breaths and the crackle of the fire, burning ever brighter in a futile fight against the encroaching darkness.